Hi, Lula. You alright? Luella. Yeah, good. Good. We'll get a few more people in. Oh. Alright. Hope you're well. On a Monday. Hey, KPS. You alright? Hi, Sherry. Ah, she's surfing with chocolate. Right. So, got a couple on here tonight. Good evening, all. I hope everyone is well. Who have we got here? Lone Aaron, hello. KPS, Sherry. There'll be a couple from Yogis, I'm sure, just in the background. So, we're going to go deeper into the simulation. I've hopefully corrected the 6,000 year error that I had yesterday. I foolishly put 600 years when it should have been 6,000 years. And funny enough, someone this evening only just mentioned 6,000 years, which is, you know, a bit of a confirmation when I've just been dealing with it for the last hour and a half, and then I just watch a whole hour about it on a live stream. Right, sorry, I've just turned the oven off. Cosmo has a tendency to turn the oven on with his tail. But that's another story. Right. I hope you've all sitting comfortably. If you are, we should begin.
Have you ever had that feeling, maybe just for a split second, that the entire world is this elaborate stage designed specifically to distract you?
Oh, I think everyone has felt that vertigo at least once.
Right. I mean, put yourself there for a second. You're walking down a crowded city street. The noise of traffic is deafening.
Yeah, totally overwhelming.
The news alerts on your phone.
Thumbs up if that's okay. Can you hear that okay? I just need one thumbs up. Who's it going to be? I think it's going to be Ken. So. Audio's good. Cheers. Well, you need some Cloudbusters. That's what you need. There we go.
Buzzing, flashing red. The people around you are arguing about something they saw on television.
It's just constant sensory input.
Exactly. And suddenly, in the middle of all that chaos, your brain just like stutters. And you think, wait, is any of this actually real?
That is the ultimate question, isn't it?
It really is. Or is this all just an incredibly complex, localized projection rendering just for me?
It is the ultimate existential vertigo. That sudden, chilling suspicion that the dense physical reality we take for granted, the pavement under your feet, the strangers on the bus, is actually something else entirely.
Something completely fabricated.
Yes. Not a shared universe, but a responsive mechanism. An interface.
So, welcome to our deep dive. Today, we are taking on a massive mission. We are unpacking the ultimate deception, really. We're looking at how to hoodwink an entire species.
It is quite the rabbit hole.
Oh, it's a massive rabbit hole. We're going to explore this crazy stack of research, theories, and ancient texts that all propose one unifying, kind of terrifying idea.
Which is that physical reality is not an objective, shared universe at all.
Right. Instead, it's a localized projection. A closed-loop trap designed to keep your consciousness entirely bound to the illusion.
And what makes this particular exploration so compelling is the sheer diversity of the disciplines involved.
It's not just one thing.
Exactly. We aren't just looking at one niche internet theory or a single philosophical school. We are crossing millennia of human thought, looking at frameworks that arose completely independent of one another.
That is the part that completely blew my mind when we were prepping for this. I mean, the eclectic mix of materials sitting on the table right now is just wild.
It's a very...
It wouldn't be anything else if it wasn't me.
strange reading list.
It really is. On one hand, we are looking at cutting-edge computational physics, specifically something called the Individualized Construct Model, or ICM.
Right.
And that's sitting alongside a highly technical hardware protocol known as SASR 138. But right next to those modern technological papers, we have ancient esoteric manuals.
Taoist internal alchemy.
Yes. And texts on the Lorena Kabbalah's Dark Tree of Life,
Yeah.
the Qliphoth, and even the modern chaos magic writings of Peter J. Carroll.
It's fascinating because the terminology shifts radically depending on the era and the culture, but the underlying architecture they describe remains astonishingly consistent.
They're all pointing at the same matrix-like trap.
Exactly. Today, we are going to connect the dots across all these fields. We want to understand not just how this hoodwink operates on a mechanical nuts and bolts level, but why it exists in the first place.
And how to break it.
Yes. Most importantly, how these disparate frameworks suggest you can actually break out of it. We are dissecting the architecture of a perceptual prison.
Okay, let's unpack this. We need to slow down and unpack this architecture first because my head is already spinning a bit.
That's totally fair.
Before we can understand how humanity is tricked on a daily basis, we really have to define what the prison actually looks like.
And according to the individualized construct model, it's not a physical cage.
Right, it is a cage of perception.
To grasp this, we have to start by completely throwing out the default assumption of modern physics.
The thing we all learn in grade school.
Right. The ICM calls our normal assumption the fully populated mesh model. That is the standard idea that there are 8 billion independent, fully conscious human beings rendering a shared objective material reality simultaneously.
Right, like you see the same moon I see, the moon is physically
Hey,
there.
Bane
and
Bear.
the universe
Good to see
exists
you, mate.
independent of our observation.
Exactly. But the ICM completely abandons that premise. It operates entirely on a single player, localized render framework.
So instead of the universe being this infinite, dark expanse filled with trillions of physical stars that exist.
Hey, Lone Frog. Good to see you. Yes, this is Notebook LM. Anyone can get hold of this. What you do is that you get your source documents. Let me show you this. Let me just show you. So you get your source documents for this particular talk that I did, and I've put in all of these and it only synthesizes what you give it. And there you go.
Look for the overlapping patterns because, I mean, in a world of constant information overload where we just accept whatever we're told.
Right, taking the time to question something as fundamental as why things fall down, that is the ultimate exercise in critical thinking.
Exactly. So let's start pulling at the threads of mainstream physics. Let's start with Einstein.
I'll explain, Frog, I'll explain what I've created with AI, but I'll do that after this short video. Yeah. This is just a breakdown of my research into the simulation, or what I believe to be a simulation. So, it's just for people to gain some new information and use their own discernment. Some of it might resonate and some of it might not. You might not be on my level. You might not be anywhere near the level. But if you are somewhere near the level, it will resonate.
The curvature of space-time. Our sources introduce a concept that immediately complicates this, and it's called TAGR, the teleparallel equivalent of general relativity.
This is such a brilliant place to start, honestly, because TAGR doesn't actually overthrow Einstein's predictions.
Wait, it doesn't.
No, it overthrows his geometry. According to the TAGR framework, gravitational effects are not a manifestation of the curvature of space-time at all.
Okay, stop right there. The whole premise of general relativity is curvature. I mean, how can you have gravity without a curved space?
You do by replacing curvature with torsion.
Torque?
Yes. TAGR argues that gravity is a manifestation of space-time torsion. And in this mathematical model, unlike standard general relativity, gravity actually acts as a definitive force. Standard relativity relies on something called the Levi-Civita connection.
The what?
The Levi-Civita connection. It's basically a mathematical way of describing how a geometric shape changes as you move it along a curved surface. Tager strips that entirely out. It uses a flat, but generically torsionful derivative operator.
Okay, let's unpack this because hearing Levi-Civita connection and flat torsionful operator just sounds like complete academic word soup.
Hey Frenchie, good to see you, mate. This may sound quite technical at first, right? It's designed to be technical because it's using the globe scientific method. At the moment, it's explaining what gravity is within the scientific peer-reviewed status, but also the scientific peer-reviewed status for other things which they don't push to the front. So they say it's fringe. Yeah, it's all relative, as it were.
Unless we can see it. Let me try an analogy.
Do.
So imagine that trampoline again.
Hey Manny,
Einstein
good to see you,
says the
mate.
mass of the bowling ball stretches the fabric downward
Hey,
into a bowl
Lois.
shape. That's curvature. But if we're talking about torsion, imagine taking a wet towel and twisting it, like wringing it out.
That is actually a highly accurate visual. You are maintaining a flat background geometry, but you are introducing a rotational strain, a twist to the vectors within that space.
But
So what it is there's two models working at the same thing. There's two models describing the same thing, and they're just keeping to the one model because it fits a bigger agenda, and they hide this other model because it's attached to so many fringe people like Tesla that proved that energy was free and is coming from the actual atmosphere, which I'm proving now.
if I twist a towel, it physically wrinkles. It's not flat anymore. How can space-time be flat but also twisted? I'm just trying to visualize how that catches a falling apple.
Right, okay, so think of it less like twisting a physical fabric and more like twisting the directional grid you use to measure the space.
The grid itself.
Yes, imagine a perfectly flat piece of graphing paper.
Mm.
In Einstein's model, you warp the paper itself into a funnel shape. In the Tager model, the paper stays perfectly flat on the table, but the grid lines drawn on it begin to twist and rotate as you move across them.
Oh, weird. Okay.
So an object moving through that space follows the twisting grid lines, which essentially pulls it off a straight path. To the observer, to us, it looks exactly like gravity.
That is wild. But I mean, why does this mathematical distinction even matter? If the apple still falls on my head, who cares if the invisible math is curved or twisted?
It matters profoundly. It matters because Tager is dynamically equivalent to general relativity.
Meaning what?
Meaning it makes the exact same predictions for planetary orbits and falling apples. It proves that even within established peer-reviewed physics, the curvature explanation is not a physical absolute. It is merely one mathematically viable way to describe gravity.
So the trampoline isn't real. It's literally just a mathematical convenience.
Precisely.
Hmm.
It tells us that we don't actually know what the true mechanism is. We just have different equations that successfully track the behavior of the objects.
Which completely shatters the illusion of certainty, right?
Yeah.
And I think that perfectly brings us to Eric Verlin. Because if curvature is optional, Verlin steps in around 2011 and says, hey, let's go further. Gravity isn't a fundamental force at all.
Yeah, he proposes entropic gravity.
Right.
And this is
Yeah, I go into torsion physics in a little bit, and I explain what Ken Wheeler can't explain. I take his 10 pillars and take it to the next level. So yeah, that's going to be interesting. That will be in the next one.
where the physics gets deeply, deeply philosophical. Verlaine inherits this entire concept from the thermodynamics of black holes, specifically the groundbreaking work of Jacob Bekenstein and Stephen Hawking.
Okay, black holes. How does that connect?
Well, they realized something incredibly bizarre. A black hole has entropy, but that entropy is not proportional to the 3D volume inside the black hole.
Wait, it's not?
No, it is proportional only to the 2D surface area of the black hole's event horizon.
Oh, that is the Bekenstein bound, right?
Yes, exactly. And entropy in this context, and this is important, is not just messiness or chaos, which is how we usually hear it described. It is a strict measure of information. It is the number of possible quantum microscopic states a system can have.
Okay, I follow that. But how does Verlin take the thermodynamic information of a black hole and turn it into the gravity that's holding me in my chair right now?
He applies that holographic principle to the entire universe. I want you to imagine a massive spherical volume of space. Around that volume, Berlin proposes a boundary, like a mathematical surface, and he calls it a holographic screen.
A screen.
Yeah, he argues that the entropy, the total information of the vacuum of space itself, can be measured on this 2D screen. And gravity emerges purely from the thermodynamic tendency of this universe to maximize its entropy.
I am really struggling to connect, like, information on a mathematical screen to a physical pulling force. How does information sorting itself out pull an apple down to the dirt?
Let's use polymer physics as an analogy.
All right.
Think of a rubber band. When you stretch a rubber band, it violently snaps back, right?
Yeah, it hurts.
But why? There is no fundamental snapping force in particle physics. What happens is that the long polymer chains in the rubber band naturally want to exist in a curled up, highly disordered state.
Because that's easier for them.
Exactly. That is a state of high entropy. Lots of possible states. When you pull the rubber band, you force those chains into a straight ordered line, low entropy.
So the pull I feel in my fingers isn't a new force at all.
Right.
It's just the
Oh, I'm here.
statistical probability
I'm listening.
of the molecules trying to return to their messy, curled up state.
Exactly. And Verlin argues gravity is the cosmic equivalent of that rubber band. When physical mass moves through space, it shifts the information states on that holographic screen.
It stretches the rubber band.
Yes. The universe naturally resists this ordering and tries to return to maximum entropy. That statistical thermodynamic pushback, that tendency to snap back, is what we experience as the force of gravity.
So gravity is just information trying to sort itself out on a cosmic hard drive. That is a staggering concept.
It really reframes everything.
Now hold on, let me push back here. If gravity is just an emergent property of information on a boundary, where does dark matter fit into this? Because mainstream physics essentially invented the concept of dark matter, specifically because galaxies are spinning so fast they should fly apart.
Right, the missing mass problem.
Yeah, there isn't enough visible mass to hold them together with standard gravity. So does Verlin's information theory actually solve the galaxy rotation problem?
Berlin famously claimed it did. He argued that his entropic gravity naturally accounts for the exact effects we usually attribute to dark matter. He even went so far as to say his math naturally derives Milgram's empirical MOND theory.
MOND being modified Newtonian dynamics, which, if I remember right, is basically an equation that just tweaks Newton's laws at very, very low acceleration.
Yes, that's exactly it. MOND basically says, let's just alter the math at the edge of galaxies so we don't have to invent invisible dark matter particles. Berlin said, look, my entropic gravity arrives at the MOND formula naturally.
Wow, that sounds like a massive win for him.
It does, but this is where we have to look really closely at our sources, because we have a rigorous critique by a physicist named Engel Rosa that completely dismantles this claim.
Oh, really? And Rosa does this by actually running
goes
Berlin
deep.
these
He
numbers
goes
in our own
deep.
backyard, doesn't he?
Frog, I
does.
tell you.
Rosa points out a massive fatal flaw. He takes Verlindy's specific mathematical expression for gravitational acceleration and applies it to small spatial scales, specifically our own solar system.
Oh,
If Verlin's exact equation were physically right, it would require a modification to standard gravity that is incredibly large at small distances.
how large are we talking? What does the math look like if you are standing?
There
on
are
the
no celestial bodies.
Well, Rosa notes that the Newtonian gravitational acceleration in Neptune's orbit is about 0.66 times 10 to the negative 5th meters per second squared. If Berlin's modification were real, the orbit of Neptune would be visibly displaced.
Like noticeably in the wrong spot.
Very noticeably. The mathematical discrepancy is so large that 19th century astronomers would have noticed it with basic telescopes. The planet simply wouldn't be where standard physics says they should be.
Ouch. Okay, so Verlin's exact formula spectacularly fails the solar system test. The rubber band snaps, I guess.
It does.
But Rosa doesn't just tear Verlin down and walk away, right? He actually offers an alternative derived from Einstein's field equation, specifically looking at the cosmological constant.
He does.
And this is where the source material gets truly wild because Rosa abandons the holographic screen entirely and instead compares gravity to a Debye process in an electrically charged atomic plasma.
Yes, and this is a brilliant lateral leap. To understand this, we have to understand what a Debye process actually is in plasma physics.
Walk me through it.
In a plasma, you basically have a soup of free-floating positive ions and negative electrons. If you introduce a foreign charged particle into that soup, the plasma reacts immediately.
Hey, Robert,
It
thanks for
squeezes,
turning
right?
up,
Like it
mate.
forms a shell around it.
Yes, exactly, a Debye sheath. If you drop a highly positive charge into the plasma, the negative electrons will rapidly swarm around it,
Oh, you
while
don't
the
have to be
positive
PC
ions will
here.
be repelled away. It forms a polarized cloud. Rosa suggests that the vacuum of space is not an empty void. It is permeated by a background energy that acts thermodynamically like a perfect fluid.
Like a plasma.
Like a plasma, exactly.
A fluid. We are moving from empty space to a fluid that changes the entire geometry of how we think about the universe.
It fundamentally changes it. And here is the really profound mechanism Rosa proposes. When you insert baryonic matter, meaning normal matter, like stars, planets, and moons, into this cosmic fluid, it acts like that foreign charge in a plasma.
Oh, wow.
It disturbs the thermodynamic equilibrium. The fluid of space physically polarizes around the mass.
So you're saying the mass of a star physically displaces the energy of the vacuum around it.
Yes. And this creates a gravitational equivalent of a displaced charge. Rosa argues that this displaced vacuum fluid is what we call dark matter.
Wait.
Yeah. Dark matter is not an invisible exotic particle floating around waiting to be discovered by a satellite. Dark matter is the entropic reaction of the space fluid to the sheer presence of normal matter.
Let me make sure I have this straight, because this is huge. Space is an ocean. A star is a boulder dropped into the ocean. The water that is pushed out of the way, the wake that is created by that boulder, that displaced medium, has an energetic weight.
Exactly.
And we've been looking at the gravitational pull of that wake and just calling it dark matter.
That is the exact implication of Rosa's hypothesis. It turns space from a dead, empty void into a dynamic, reactive medium. Space itself is actively participating in the gravitational dance.
That is incredible. And it perfectly sets up the next major conceptual shift in our sources. Because if space is a reactive fluid and energetic plasma, that inherently challenges our most foundational assumptions about electromagnetism, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
If the vacuum isn't empty, how do electric and magnetic fields actually travel through it? Which brings us to the physics of moving media.
Exactly. Because if the vacuum is a reactive fluid, then our standard textbook equations for electricity and magnetism might be incomplete. We have to look at the work of James Clerk Maxwell.
Right. We have Zonglin Wang's paper in our stack on expanding Maxwell's equations. And for anyone who took a physics class, Maxwell's equations are basically the holy grail. They describe exactly how electric and magnetic fields propagate. But Wang points out a massive blind spot, right?
He does.
He says standard textbook Maxwell equations assume that the boundary and the volume of the medium the fields are traveling through are totally fixed in time. They assume the medium is completely stationary.
And in the real world, and certainly out in the cosmos,
It's not stationary.
Wang derives an expanded form of Maxwell's equations by adding a crucial component to what is
That's
known
why it's
as
called
the displacement current.
an etheric
This
pulse,
new mathematical component, often referred to as the Wang term,
the carrier
specifically
wave,
accounts for surface electrostatic charges
It's
that are in
constant.
physical motion.
but it's
Surface charges
within
in motion.
a boundary.
Wait, like tribal electrification. Static electricity.
Yes, static generated by friction or contact. Wang's work is actually heavily rooted in microengineering, specifically something called triboelectric nanogenerators, or 10-ANGs. These are physical devices designed to harvest ambient, high entropy energy.
High entropy energy meaning just like the random, messy background noise of reality.
Exactly. Low quality, low frequency energy from our everyday environment. We're talking about the vibration of a bridge, the friction of your shoes on the carpet, the wind blowing against a leaf. TENS capture that friction and turn it into usable electrical power.
That's super cool.
It is, and the Wang term mathematically describes how the physical movement of these charged surfaces generates a displacement current, which actually acts as a source of electromagnetic waves.
Okay, I understand the engineering application here. You're rubbing materials together, you're harvesting static, but I really want to push back on how this scales up.
Sure.
Because we are trying to deconstruct gravity and the cosmos here, not just build a better battery.
Right.
How does a nanogenerator harvesting shoe friction apply to the macrocosmos?
That's the leap. Right. But Wang is very explicit about this extrapolation. He states that this expanded theory profoundly impacts how we observe electromagnetic wave generation and reflection.
Yeah, solar
from moving
wind is
objects in
radiation that's
Oh, like
carried
what
on the
kind of
carrier
objects?
wave.
Take a comet tearing through the solar system or a star moving through a galactic medium. These bodies possess massive surface charges. If the boundary of that charged medium is in motion, this expanded equation dictates that its interaction with electromagnetic fields is fundamentally different than what standard stationary Maxwell equations would predict.
So you're saying our baseline math for how light and electromagnetism behave in space has literally been missing a term for moving boundaries.
Wang's work strongly suggests exactly that. It shows that even our most revered, untouched physics equations are constantly being updated to account for dynamic, interacting, moving mediums.
And this realization that space is active, that mediums move, that our equations are incomplete, this is the exact threshold we cross into the truly radical alternative frameworks in our source stack today.
We're leaving the shore now.
We really are.
Yeah.
Because if mainstream physics is starting to hesitantly suggest, hey, maybe space acts kind of like a fluid, the alternative sources take that, completely shatter the glass, and introduce the concept of the mechanics of the dielectric plenum.
The plenum, yes. This is where we leave the standard model behind entirely. In this alternative framework, space is not an empty expanding metric. It is not Einstein's curvature. It is a dense, ultrafine, continuous dielectric medium.
I want to use an analogy here for the listener just to ground this. Think of being a fish in the deep ocean. The fish doesn't think about the water right. It just perceives the distance between itself and a coral reef, and it thinks, I'll swim through the emptiness to get to that reef.
But the water is always there.
Exactly.
Wazza, are you talking about Crow 777 and his lunar wave, his tidal wave that went the entire way across the moon and was caught on his video? It was like the moon was refreshing, like a lens. I think that's the one you're talking about.
The water is there. It is dictating the ambient pressure. It is dictating buoyancy. It is dictating how fast light and sound
Yeah, it just
can
shows
actually reach the fit.
it shows you it's going through a medium and not a vacuum.
The dielectric plenum model basically says we are the fish and space is the water.
That is exactly the shift in perspective required. But of course, this claim invites an immediate and severe challenge from mainstream physics. The standard model has an experiment they absolutely love to cite to disprove the idea of an invisible medium.
Oh, the vacuum chamber experiment. You see this in literally every Physics 101 video on YouTube. They take a giant steel chamber, they pump all the air out.
So with this, I completely dismember our favourite musician, Brian Cox.
And they drop a feather and a heavy steel hammer, and they fall at the exact same rate, hitting the ground simultaneously. Mainstream physics points to that and says, see, we remove the air resistance, the space is now a perfect vacuum, and this proves mass curves space-time equally for all objects.
Right, it's their mic drop moment.
So how on earth does the dielectric plenum model answer that? If space isn't empty, if it's a dense water, why do a feather and a hammer fall at the exact same speed?
The alternative text answer to this is mechanically fascinating. It argues that the fundamental premise of the vacuum chamber experiment is just flawed. Pumping the air out of a chamber only removes the physical gas molecules.
The oxygen, the nitrogen, that stuff.
Exactly. It removes the gas. It does absolutely nothing to remove the ambient dielectric field or the overarching pressure gradient of the plenum itself.
Wait, so you pumped out the macroscopic gas, but the microscopic water, the dielectric medium, is still completely present inside the chamber.
Yes, exactly. Think of submerged objects. Just as an object submerged in a physical body of water experiences buoyant forces based on its volume and density relative to the water, an object in a continuous dielectric field experiences a uniform downward pressure gradient.
Uniform downward pressure.
Yes. The feather and the hammer accelerate at the exact same rate, not because of the geometry of space-time curvature, but because that acceleration is a strict property of the medium's overarching pressure sink.
Wait,
Yeah, Wazza, but you see, science have got maths for that. They can't show it, of course. They can build a vacuum, but they can't build a total vacuum. They can build a 99.9% vacuum. But they can't prove what their mathematics actually does. The maths work. Yeah, I agree, the maths work. But they can't reenact it here on Earth to prove the maths work. No, Manny. The moment I moved within a circle, the sound cut out. Yeah, exactly that. But there are other explanations that I don't put forward. I only put forward that.
explain that. The acceleration belongs to the medium, not the objects being dropped.
Correct. The medium itself is or pressing downward at a specific constant rate. The mass of the objects you drop inside it is completely irrelevant to the speed of the medium's pressure gradient. If a river is flowing at 5 miles an hour, a tiny leaf and a massive heavy log will both travel down the river at exactly 5 miles an hour.
Wow. That makes terrifying logical sense, honestly. If the vacuum is actually a dense plenum, and gravity isn't Einstein's geometric curvature, and it isn't Verlin's information entropy, and it certainly isn't Newton's mass attracting mass, then what is mechanically pulling the river down?
And this is where we dive into the most intricate, mathematically dense, and radical source in our entire stack. The Synthetic Aperture Signal Reconstruction Framework, which is known as SS-138, and its complex relationship with Ken Wheeler's analog field metaphysics.
Here we
To
go.
admit, reading through the SS-138 documentation felt like staring at the leaked source code of the universe.
It's intense.
It is intensely complex, but their core premise is absolute. It entirely rejects mass attraction. It vehemently rejects the concept of action at a distance.
This is a crucial historical point, too. Action at a distance is the idea that two objects, like the Earth and the Moon, can physically interact across completely empty space without any physical medium connecting them.
It's magic, basically.
Even Isaac Newton was deeply uncomfortable with it. He called it an absurdity in his own letters. The SS-138 model and Wheeler's work both agree on this. An empty vacuum cannot transmit an invisible pulling force. It violates the basic rules of mechanics.
Okay, so if there is no invisible tractor beam pulling us, how do we stay on the ground? Why aren't we floating?
Through a mechanism the SS-138 framework explicitly calls vertical dielectric displacement. To visualize this, you have to completely abandon the idea of an infinite expanding universe. You have to conceptualize reality as a closed engineered system, a
The reason why we don't fall to the ground and the reason why we're not floating up is because we've got muscles and a bone structure. And if we didn't have our muscles or our neurons, we would be on the floor, not being able to move. Paraplegic. It's got nothing to do with gravity.
construct.
Engineered. Intentionally designed.
The texts heavily imply a highly organized phase coherent system. In this model, the overarching structure of our reality consists of two key boundaries. There is an upper anode layer, which the texts refer to as the firmamental boundary, and a lower baseline pressure sink, which is the terrestrial plane we actually live on.
Okay, an anode top and a baseline bottom. It's a giant battery. or like a capacitor.
So I'll show you what we're
It
talking about.
operates on the precise principles of electrostatics. Because there is a massive potential difference between the top of the system and the bottom, there is a constant unidirectional flowing pressure gradient through the dielectric medium. Objects don't fall because they are attracted to the dirt. They are impelled downward toward the lowest dielectric pressure zone.
So they're literally just seeking equilibrium in the fluid.
Yes. Weight in this framework is not a fundamental property of matter. Weight is governed entirely by fluid dynamic and electrostatic displacement. An object rests on the ground simply because its relative dielectric permittivity is heavier than the surrounding medium. It is seeking absolute baseline equilibrium. It's basically electrostatic buoyancy.
Okay, I want to read the actual mathematical formula they provide in the SS-138 diagrams because they don't just speak in analogies, they map this out mathematically.
Please do.
They define universal acceleration as a vector. A equals the gradient, that upside down triangle symbol, navel of D over epsilon. Let me translate the Greek for you. Vertical acceleration equals the gradient of the dielectric field pressure divided by permittivity.
The formula is the mechanical beating heart of their physics. But to really grasp how radical this is, we have to look at where SS-138 diverges from Ken Wheeler's Neoplatonic analog model.
Right, because they don't agree on everything.
No, our sources point out a massive philosophical and physical schism here. Both frameworks absolutely agree on the existence of the dielectric medium, but Wheeler treats this medium as raw, uncreated, continuous analog nature. It just exists.
And SS-138 disagrees with that.
SS-138 takes it a massive ontological step further. They argue that the reality we inhabit is not a raw natural fluid. It is an engineered, synthetically compiled, phase-coherent construct.
Synthetically compiled. I mean, you are describing a matrix at this point.
I am describing exactly what their dimensional projection equation outlines. The SS-138 texts feature a master equation called the D equation. It states that D, which represents
William.
three-dimensional
Right.
spatial volume, like the actual room you are sitting in right now, equals the gradient of dielectric inertia divided by phi cubed.
Phi being the golden ratio.
Yes.
Well, what does the denominator phi cubed physically represent?
Phi cubed.
In their model,
Yeah.
phi cubed represents magnetic spatial acceleration.
Okay, I need to stop you.
Yeah.
Because I read this section of the source 3 times and my brain nearly short-circuited.
Yep.
Is this model explicitly arguing that 3D space isn't real? That the physical distance between my left hand and my right hand is just an illusion?
That is unequivocally what the mathematics of SS-138 are arguing. Look at the equation you just read. The math shows that as the numerator, the dielectric pressure goes to infinity, the spatial dimension mathematically collapses to zero, becomes pure potential, a state they call counter space.
So space
Potential.
only exists because of magnetic wave interference. That's what you're saying.
According to SS-138, yes. 3D space is a projected mirage. You only perceive a three-dimensional volume because magnetic acceleration forces the dielectric field to expand along the geometry of the golden ratio. Constructive and destructive wave interference within the dielectric field is what generates the physical illusion of mass, geometry, and 3D volume.
I am going to push back hard on this.
Leap for it.
Because if I look outside my window right now, I see a 3D world. I can measure it with a ruler. I look up at the night sky and I see celestial bodies. The moon, Jupiter, stars,
Take
and
care,
standard
Luella.
physics tells me they are massive spheres orbiting us at unimaginable distances in a literal vacuum. If gravity is just a unidirectional downward pressure in a closed flat capacitor,
Right.
why do we observe spherical planets and vast astronomical distances?
This brings us
This
to the
one's for
concept
you,
of
Manny.
micro-macro mapping, which is how the SS-138 framework connects small-scale laboratory optical physics to the mechanics of the sky itself. To answer your question, they introduce macro-scale synthetic aperture lensing. The text fundamentally argues that the physical spherical geometry of the cosmos
Hey,
observed
who are we? You
at
are,
those
man.
vast distances are illusions
Patrolling.
caused by optics.
Okay, prove it. How can a physical sphere like Jupiter be an optical illusion? The sources mention a physical verification using something called ferrocells.
Yes, the ferrocell verification. A ferrocell is a fascinating physical device.
Ken
Consists
loves
of a
his
very thin
ferrocells.
layer of ferrofluid, which is a magnetic fluid sandwiched between two optical glass plates. If you just look at it in normal light, it's a flat, dark smudge.
To sound very impressive.
But when you place a magnet beneath it and view it under polarized LED light, the light interacts with the magnetic field lines.
What do you see when you do that?
You see incredibly complex geometric hyperboloid interference lines. The light physically bends around the magnetic field. These lines mathematically converge toward a 0 point of acceleration. But here's the crucial part. it creates a profound depth of field illusion.
An illusion of depth.
Yes, logically, that you are looking at a flat two-dimensional plane of fluid between two pieces of glass. But visually, to your eye, it looks like a deep three-dimensional holographic tunnel that you could literally reach your hand down into. And the geometry of that illusion is governed precisely by the golden ratio, that 1/phi cubed from their equation.
That is a neat party trick in a lab. But what's fascinating is how they scale this up. Because SS-138 argues, look at this microscale experiment. Now apply those exact same optics to the sky above your head.
Exactly. They apply this exact same geometric lensing to the Earth's atmosphere. Think about the atmosphere for a second. It is not uniform at all. It consists of varying pressures, densities, and temperatures. In this model, these are dielectric strata. As solar, lunar, and stellar light passes through these atmospheric layers, it undergoes a phenomenon called phase retardation. The light waves are slowed, bent, and phase shifted by the refractive index gradients of the medium.
So, we're talking about being at the boundary of a medium. Now, it's quite hard to put into words. So, imagine you are swimming underwater. You've just dived into the water really deep and you've swam down. And you're at the bottom, quite far down, and you're looking up. Now, the surface of the water is the boundary to the medium that you are in. With your critical thinking, is it a window that you can see through, or is it a mirror of everything that is within?
But let me get this straight. When you look up at the stars and you see these vast 3D astronomical distances, stars, that we are told are millions of light years away, this SS-138 model is arguing that you are not looking at physical places.
No, they argue you are looking at localized caustic patterns.
Wait, like the ripples of light at the bottom of a swimming pool?
Exactly like that. A caustic is the envelope of light rays reflected or refracted by a curved surface or object. The SS-138 model proposes that the celestial bodies we see are literally a holographic mirage projected on a closed atmospheric boundary, mimicking the exact same hyperdimensional depth illusion as the ferrocell in the lab.
Let me just wrap my head around this. They are arguing that celestial depth astronomical distance is functionally identical to optical depth.
Yes. They're saying space, as we see it looking up, is just the negative image of the ether. It is a synthetically compiled optical projection.
So what happens when we try to look past that? What is the edge of the universe in this optical model? Because mainstream cosmology says the boundary of the observable universe is simply the distance light has traveled since the Big Bang, some 13.8 billion years ago.
Yeah.
What is the boundary in SS-138?
In the SS-138 framework, the boundary is strictly optical and physical. It is the point of total internal reflection at the firmamental aperture boundary.
Total internal reflection. Okay, let me use another analogy. If you are swimming underwater in a pool and you look up at the surface of the water from a steep angle, you don't actually see the sky.
No, you don't.
The surface of the water acts like a perfect silver mirror, reflecting the bottom of the pool right back at you.
That is the perfect analogy.
Just like when the P900 came out, you see further because the optics were better. It's that simple. We are limited by the optics.
At that firmamental boundary layer, the localized field density of the dielectric medium
Because it mirrors back the limit that the optics go to.
Is maximum saturation. It hits a refractive limit. The index of refraction is such that high frequency electromagnetic signals, which is what light is, cannot penetrate it. They undergo total internal reflection and bounce back inward.
So the universe isn't an infinite, empty, expanding void. It is a closed optical loop, an iterative, projective mirage reflecting back on itself.
Yes, that is the absolute core architecture of their cosmology.
My brain is officially doing jumping jacks. Okay, let's try to ground this somehow. We have a firmamental lens above us projecting the holographic sky, and we have a terrestrial plane below us acting as a dielectric pressure sink. But fundamentally, every single system needs an anchor, right? You can't have a giant enclosed battery lens construct just floating in nowhere. What holds this entire dielectric structure together? Where is the center of gravity?
Well, in mainstream physics, the center of gravity for the Earth is a physical, super dense molten iron core right at the center of the globe. But if you are in a planar system with a unidirectional pressure gradient, you obviously cannot use a molten core.
No, that wouldn't make sense.
Right. So the SS-138 model introduces the counterspatial core.
The sources also refer to it as the black sun, which just sounds incredibly intense. Where is it?
The geometry of their model places the anchor directly underneath the geographical North Pole. But it is vital to understand that this is not a physical object. It is not a massive rock or a ball of magma.
So what is it? A black hole.
Not in the Einsteinian sense. It is described as the inertial null or the block wall. To understand a block wall, think of a standard bar magnet.
Okay, North Pole, South Pole.
Right. You have a North Pole and a South Pole. But right in the middle, exactly at the center between them, the magnetic field mathematically cancels out. It is a domain wall of zero
A
magnetism.
null zone.
Yes. The black sun is a macroscopic, non-spatial domain of pure potential and total inertia. They call it counterspace because it is completely devoid of spatial dimensions and electromagnetic radiation. It is black because no light can exist there at all. It is the dielectric null point from which all magnetism in the system is generated as a perturbation.
So when a compass points north, it isn't pointing to a massive chunk of magnetic iron under the Arctic ice. It's pointing to the absolute 0 point of the field itself.
Exactly. The compass is pointing to the null. The black sun acts as the ultimate lock-in-place coordinate for the entire planar system's geometry. It anchors the vertical dielectric displacement that pushes everything down. It is the engine of the construct.
All right, so that black sun anchors the geometry of space, or I guess the projection of space. But what about time? Because as we went deeper into these sources, I noticed a massive fundamental disagreement between Ken Wheeler's metaphysics and the SS-138 framework regarding time.
It is a brilliant and really heavy debate. Ken Wheeler's analog metaphysics takes a very strict Neoplatonic view. He argues that time is an absolute illusion.
Just totally made up by us.
Basically, he says time is not a physical thing. It is just an abstract, human derivative measurement of mass and magnitude in motion. His argument is that if there are no physical objects moving, there is no time. Only the eternal now exists.
But SS-138 pushes back on that incredibly hard.
Very hard. SS-138 argues that time is not an illusion, nor is it a linear one-way dimension like we normally visualize it. You know, a river flowing from the past straight into the future. They define time as a literal physical measurement of dielectric field saturation.
Okay, let's unpack that. Saturation. Like a sponge slowly filling up with water.
Or capacitor slowly charging up with electricity. Remember, this entire model views the universe as a closed containment grid, an engineered synthetic construct. As the macro system operates, as life exists and energy moves around, charge density accumulates in the overarching field. And because it is a closed system with a finite boundary, it cannot accumulate charge forever.
It has a maximum capacity. And what happens when a capacitor reaches maximum capacity? It discharges.
Exactly. It reaches a threshold where it must physically discharge or phase invert to reset the baseline pressure.
And these physical field discharges are what human beings perceive and record as macro time cycles.
Yes. The SS-138 text actually breaks down these chronological vectors of the containment grid with very specific numerical values. They describe the 138-year microcycle, which acts as a compulsory phase inversion, like a minor electrical recalibration of the grid. Then they map a 555-year semi-cycle, which involves a much larger harmonic frequency reversal.
And then they mention something truly terrifying, the 6,000-year Phoenix vector. The text treats this like the ultimate catastrophic clock.
Hmm.
What physically and mechanically happens during a Phoenix event in this model?
Mathematically, they describe the Phoenix event as a total aperture recalibration. Remember the D equation. Spatial volume equals dielectric inertia over magnetic spatial acceleration.
Yeah, the matrix equation.
During the Phoenix vector, the system reaches such absolute dielectric saturation that the magnetic spatial acceleration, the denominator of that equation, drops to zero.
Oh my god. If the denominator drops to zero, the result is undefined, or infinity.
The dielectric pressure goes to infinity. The result is a complete systemic dielectric reset, a macro sky grid blackout. The projected three-dimensional dimension, the entire geometric volume of our reality, cannot be sustained. It literally collapses back into counter space.
I need a visceral analogy for this, because you're describing the end of the world as a math problem, and it's freaking me out a little.
Think of a massive server farm rendering an incredibly complex, ultra-realistic virtual reality simulation. The servers are running super hot, the memory buffers are filling up. The Phoenix vector is the moment the memory buffer hits 100%. The system administrators literally pull the master plug. The servers lose power, the magnetic hard drives spin down to zero, and the entire virtual 3D world instantly vanishes into blackness. It uncompiles. Then the cache is cleared, the power is flipped back on, and the simulation boots back up from zero.
Reality essentially uncompiles itself, a hard system reboot of the universe.
Mhm.
And time is just the silent countdown to the next reboot.
That is precisely how the SS-138 framework describes it.
I am breathless. We have gone on an insane journey today. We started with twisting wet towels of space-time integer. We moved to Verlin's information entropy, trying to sort itself out. We debated Rose's displaced plasma fluid universes, where dark matter is just the wake of a star. We broke Maxwell's equations with moving boundaries. And we ended up inside a synthetically compiled holographic sky projection, powered by a black sun, waiting for a 6,000-year capacitor discharge to reboot reality.
Yeah, all that hydrogen, because hydrogen is the key, really. At the end of the periodic table, when hydrogen becomes pre-hydrogen.
It is a lot to process.
It is. But we have to pull this all together. And the SS-138 texts offer one final mind-bending concept that puts you, the listener, right at the direct center of all of this.
This is perhaps the most profound divergence in the text regarding the role of the active observer. In Wheeler's raw analog model, the human observer is ultimately just a
Hi,
passive,
Leslie.
phenomenal imprint.
Just a bystander.
Essentially, yes. You are a shadow cast by the interactions of the field. You can observe the mechanics,
one more
but you
after
are
this.
unable to fundamentally change them. You are just watching the movie.
But SS-138 says no. You are not a passive observer. You are an active transceiver.
Because human cognition, human consciousness is built from the exact same harmonic source code as the macro construct itself. Your brain, your neural architecture, and your conscious intent operate on the exact same dielectric principles that power the firmament and the black sun. Therefore, your mental coherence functions as an actual physical dielectric perturbation in the field.
Take it a step further. What does that actually mean for the person listening to this right now?
It means your internal geometric alignment, your conscious focus, can physically shift the localized field impedance around you. You are not just processing information, you are transmitting it back into the grid. You can literally bend the probability matrix.
So when localized human intent aligns with the non-local dielectric synchronicity of the system, you act as an antenna. You are capable of altering the physical compilation of the field around you. You are not just living in the universe, you are actively compiling it with every thought.
Exactly, you are part of the rendering engine.
Let's synthesize this incredible, massive journey.
Yeah, it's the
Because
if you look at
regardless of where
my
you fall on
work,
the spectrum of theories, a profound pattern emerges here. Whether we're
Wolf
talking about
VIP,
Einstein's elegant,
yeah, I break down the
space-time,
Walter
or
Russell
Tager's
uh,
mathematically flat but twisting torsion.
Or Verlin's emergent
when it comes to the
entropy
last
on a 2D
element.
holographic screen. Or
It then
Rose's
becomes
brilliant displaced
non-matter.
dark matter of a reactive plasma fluid.
Or Wang's expanded equations for moving media.
Yeah,
Or the
I've
staggering
explained
SS-138 dielectric inertial compression model.
I've explained all my research, tried to get peer reviewed, and I couldn't because it was cited with Tesla's work. So I removed Tesla and put Marconi, and yeah, we're all good to go. So I did a big deep dive into the scientific peer review about that. It's in one of my videos. You know, they waited till he died, and then 6 months later they cleared the record, but they didn't actually update education. There you go.
With its firmamental optical lens and counterspatial core. Every single one of these models, from the most accepted
17 of his patents were actually in Marconi's UK patent.
peer-reviewed mainstream physics to the most radical, boundary-pushing alternative metaphysics, every single one is humanity's desperate attempt to decode the invisible mechanics of the universe. They are all trying to solve the impossible riddle of action at a distance. Why do we stay tethered to this ground?
The pattern is that they all refuse to accept it just is. They all demand physical mechanism, whether
No, I
that
didn't,
mechanism
William.
is a
I'll go
bent
back and have a look.
trampoline, a twisting geometric grid, an entropic rubber band, a fluid dynamic
Hang on.
wake, or a synthetically compiled electrostatic pressure gradient. Humanity demands to know the mechanics of the cage we are in.
We've discussed gravity today as a mathematical curve, as a displaced fluid, and finally as a downward electrostatic pressure toward a zero-point core. We've discussed time as the gradual, terrifying charging of an enclosed cosmic battery.
I don't see it,
I
William.
want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over as you go about
I've got
your
it on
day.
all messages as well.
If the SS-138 framework is even partially correct, if human consciousness acts as an active transceiver built from the same code as the cosmos, capable of physically perturbing this dielectric field, does that mean the collective, focused intent of our minds could actually alter the literal physical weight of the world? If gravity is ultimately just a field of information and pressure, and your mind is an antenna that can bend that field, how much does your perception weigh?
That is a phenomenal question to end on.
Thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly deep dive into the true nature of gravity. Keep questioning the fundamental assumptions, look up at that firmamental lens, and whatever you do, stay insanely curious.
Insanely curious. Indeed. Right. Bum bum. The architectural downloads. Where's that then? Let me just turn this on then. Right. Here we go. It's in there somewhere. Here we go. So this one is hi Phoenix. You alright?
Whether I look up at the night sky or not. The ICM, have you ever had that feeling, maybe just for a split second, that the entire world is elaborate stage play designed specifically to distract you?
Oh, I think everyone has felt that vertigo at least once.
Right. I mean, put yourself there for a second. You're walking down a crowded city street. The noise of traffic is deafening.
Yeah, totally overwhelming.
The news alerts on your phone are buzzing, flashing
Yeah.
red.
Yeah, I've got a decode that decodes the hieroglyphics into ancient Welsh and then into English, proving that the UK was the original language that then, because of a catastrophe that was about to happen, they sought refuge in Egypt. And they spent hundreds of years. And then they moved back. And the lineage that went back was the King Arthur. And then there was another catastrophe. And then we had the Dark Ages. And the rest is history that you have been taught and is still all a lie.
The people around you are arguing about something they saw on television?
It's just constant sensory input.
Exactly. And suddenly, in the middle of all that chaos, your brain just like stutters. And you think, wait, is any of this actually real?
That is the ultimate question, isn't it?
It really is. Or is this all just an incredibly complex, localized projection rendering just for me?
It is the ultimate existential vertigo. That sudden, chilling suspicion that the dense physical reality we take for granted, the pavement under your
Hey,
feet,
Buddha,
the strangers
you
on
alright?
the bus, is actually something else entirely.
Something completely fabricated.
Yes, not a shared universe, but a responsive mechanism, an interface.
So, welcome to our deep dive.
Enjoy.
Today, we are taking on a massive mission.
It's always
We're
massive.
unpacking the ultimate deception, really. We're looking at how to hoodwink an entire species.
It is quite the rabbit hole.
Oh, it's a massive rabbit hole. We're going to explore this crazy stack of research, theories, and ancient texts that all propose one unifying, kind of terrifying idea.
Which is that physical reality is not an objective, shared universe at all.
Right. Instead, it's a localized projection, a closed-loop trap designed to keep your consciousness entirely bound to the illusion.
And what makes this particular exploration so compelling is the sheer diversity of the disciplines involved.
It's not just one thing.
Exactly. We aren't just looking at one niche internet theory or a single philosophical school. We are crossing millennia of human thought, looking at frameworks that arose completely independent of one another.
That is the part that completely blew my mind when we were prepping for this. I mean, the eclectic mix of materials sitting on the table right now is just wild.
It's a very strange reading list.
It really is. On one hand, we are looking at cutting edge.
It must have done, William. I've gone through it again.
Specifically, something called the
I've not seen it.
Individualized Construct Model, or ICM.
Right.
And that's sitting alongside a highly technical hardware protocol known as SASR 138. But right next to those modern technological papers, we have ancient esoteric manuals.
Taoist internal alchemy.
Yes. And texts on the Lorianic Kabbalah's Dark Tree of Life,
Yeah.
the Qliphoth, and even the modern chaos magic writings of Peter J. Carroll.
This goes
It's
deep.
fascinating because the terminology shifts radically depending on the era and the culture, but the underlying architecture they describe remains astonishingly consistent.
They're all pointing at the same matrix-like trap.
Exactly. Today, we are going to connect the dots across all these fields. We want to understand not just how this hoodwink operates on a mechanical nuts and bolts level, but why it exists in the first place.
And how to break it.
Yes. Most importantly, how these disparate frameworks suggest you can actually break out of it. We are dissecting the architecture of a perceptual prism.
Okay, let's unpack this. We need to slow down and unpack this architecture first because my head is already spinning a bit.
That's totally fair.
Before we can understand how humanity is tricked on a daily basis, we really have to define what the prison actually looks like.
And according to the individualized construct model, it's not a physical cage.
Right, it is a cage of perception.
To grasp this, we have to start by completely throwing out the default assumption of modern physics.
The thing we all learn in grade school.
Right. The ICM calls our normal assumption the fully populated mesh model. That is the standard idea that there are 8 billion independent, fully conscious human beings rendering a shared objective material reality simultaneously.
Right, like you see the same moon I see, the moon is physically there and the universe exists independent of our observation.
Exactly. But the ICM completely abandons that premise. It operates entirely on a single player, localized render framework.
So instead of the universe being this infinite, dark expanse filled with trillions of physical stars that exist, whether I look up at the night sky or not, the ICM proposes what it calls the skybox effect.
Which is such a great term for it.
It is. If you've ever played a video game, you know what a skybox is. It's that painted panoramic background, the distant mountains, the swirling clouds, the deep space that makes the game world feel incredibly vast.
Right, but it's just a flat projection.
Exactly. No matter how long you walk toward those mountains, you can never actually reach them. It's a 2D projection designed to give the
Hi,
illusion
Knox.
of
You
infinite
alright?
space wrapped around your character's immediate playable area.
So it's brought up this. Let me try and explain this now then. So if there's 8 billion of us, like they say, and that everyone shares exactly in reality, that's what the main consensus is. Now, we have many different objective truths. So this makes me believe that, well, observations show us that the simulation that we observe, especially when seeing reflections of light, the sun only comes to my feet at the shoreline when the sun is setting. But I know it comes to your feet too if you were on your shoreline too. But I don't see that, even if someone was 50 meters away from me on the same beach. I don't see the light going to their feet, only to mine. Yet they're seeing the sun going to their feet and not mine. So whose feet is it going to from the observation? So it's going to be a combination of observable as a singular and as a collective in certain things, depending on your frequency and your beliefs. The collective anyway. And even within the collective, people have their own beliefs within a collective. That's what makes them change from belief to belief.
ICM suggests that our macro scale reality operates on the exact same computational principle.
I mean, so like everything.
Everything large scale.
No, I got that,
distant
William.
Galaxies,
That just comes
massive
through.
global news events, complex geopolitics happening on the other side of the planet.
On
These aren't
111 as
physically
well.
real, objective events happening in a shared mesh.
That is wild.
They are background parameters. They are data packets fed into your localized awareness to enforce boundary limits and give you the illusion of a massive consequential world.
Which feels like a very modern Silicon Valley
Cheers,
way to
Buddha.
view the universe. But what's so crazy is that this exact computational model was described thousands of years ago, way before anyone had a GPU or knew what rendering software was.
It shows up in so many ancient traditions.
I mean, look at Gnosticism, specifically the Nag Hammadi texts. They describe something called the Archontic overlay.
Right.
They viewed the planetary spheres and the vastness of the cosmos not as physical rocks in a vacuum, but as literal simulation walls.
An artificial construct.
Exactly, built by a lesser, ignorant architect they called the Demiurge, entirely to keep the divine spark human consciousness trapped in a fake sky.
And that concept isn't isolated to the Gnostics. If you look at Advaita Vedanta, the ancient Hindu non-dual philosophy, they call this exact rendering software Maya.
Maya.
Yes. Now, in the West,
Cheers,
we usually
Dolly.
translate Maya simply as illusion, which really flattens the concept.
It makes it sound like just a magic trick.
Right. But the deeper translation implies the power of display, or that which measures. It isn't just a trick, it's an active processing mechanism.
Like actual software.
Exactly. Maya is the software that takes pure, undivided, infinite awareness and mathematically renders it into the localized experience of distinct objects, separate people, and linear time.
And then you have Yogacara Buddhism, taking it a step further. They literally call themselves the mind-only school.
A very fitting name.
Very fitting. They have this concept of the alaya vijnana, which translates to the storehouse consciousness. But when you read how it works, it operates exactly like a computer's memory buffer loading environmental data packets.
Let's break down the mechanics of that memory buffer because it's crucial for understanding the hoodwink. Think about how a modern computer handles a massive virtual environment.
Okay.
It doesn't keep the entire world active in the RAM all at once.
Right, that would crash the system entirely.
It would. It stores the raw unrendered code in the hard drive and only loads the assets when your camera angle swings in that direction.
Just popping into existence as you look at it.
The Alaya Vijna is that storage drive. The sensation of touching a wooden table or seeing a distant star is just a localized data packet being pulled from the storehouse and processed by your sensory consciousness at that exact microsecond.
So the external material world, independent of your active perception, simply does not exist. It remains uncompiled code.
Precisely.
That is just, it really shifts how you look at the room you're sitting in right now.
It can be unsettling.
It is.
Yeah.
But it gets darker. This brings us to one of the most chilling parallels we found, the Kabbalistic concept of the clip-off.
Yes, the shadow side of the tree of life.
In Jewish mysticism, the tree of life represents the divine emanation of reality. But the clip-offs are the husks or shells that trap the light.
And the texts detail two specific spheres of the clip-off that act as the
I
primary.
thought you might like this,
context of the
Manny.
hoodwink. First, you have sectorial, known as the concealing ones.
Concealing ones.
The mechanical purpose of sartorial is to hide the true inner creative force of the universe behind lifeless structural shapes.
So it enforces the material illusion.
Yes, it makes you look at a table and think that is solid wood rather than that is vibrating localized energy. It makes you think the surface is the totality of reality.
And then right below that you have thaumiel, the contending forces.
Yes.
Its job is to take the perfect, undivided unity of existence and violently cleave it into an aggressive, eternal duality. Us versus them, good versus evil, subject versus object.
That's the engine of conflict.
It forces you to constantly view the world through a lens of separation, which keeps you totally distracted from realizing you are the one projecting it.
But the question is, why would a divine or infinite system trap itself in these shells to begin with?
Right, why build the prison?
The Lurianic Kabbalah provides a profound cosmological explanation for this localized simulation. Isaac Luria, a 16th century mystic, proposed the concept of zimzums.
Zims.
The idea is that before creation,
Lone Errant, did you see the Eurovision Song Contest with Madonna in Israel?
Good morning.
This is for
are you going?
entertainment term and
Away from this.
From
She's a world.
entertainment purposes only. I won't play any volume. In fact, it's probably easier doing it that way, isn't it? You get to see it then. Right. Tell me what you see. Let's get rid of that for a change. So she's setting up the stage right this very second. These are all the spiders in the Clepothic realm. What are they doing now? They're picking up the two pillars from the bottom, switching them around. And what are they going to do with them? Okay, can you see it better this time? In come the pillars from the bottom, and they're being swapped over. And they're from the bottom. And now where they're going. The ritual is done. That's it. Swap from black to white. We don't need to see any more than that. So what they did was they swapped the pillars. So that's the tree of life. What she was trying to do was to try to turn the pillars back, because they have been booby trapped for a very long time now. And this was back in 2019, I believe. And this was when she lost her queen. She was no longer the Dark Witch. That was then handed over to... it was a few others that were Agwals at the time, but it eventually went to Taylor Swift, if you didn't know that already. She's the one with the unfortunate status. Oh, and we'll sound.
creation, the divine was an infinite, borderless light of non-creation. It filled everything. There
Taylor
was no
Swift, yeah,
space for a
yeah.
universe.
Because it was already totally full.
Exactly. So to create a finite universe, the divine had
You only
to
have to look at
voluntarily
her
confine
videos
itself.
and you
It had
see
to
all of her
contract, pulling
magical
back its
spells
infinite
in it.
nature to create a vacuum, an empty void of non-being.
Okay, wait. I want to make sure I really understand the mechanics of Zimzum. It's almost like if you have a computer hard drive that is completely 100%.
I should do a
full
breakdown of
of
Taylor
one
Swift one day,
massive
actually, on
infinite
all her
file.
That's a good
videos and how
analogy.
You can't
esoteric
install
they
a
are,
new operating system on it.
how her
You
magic
partition the
works.
drive. You have to literally format a blank sector, mathematically blocking out the infinite file, just to create a void where you can install something new and finite.
Like human reality.
Exactly.
That is a remarkably accurate way to visualize a 16th century mystical concept. Yes.
Yep.
The divine partitioned itself to create a localized vacuum. And into that vacuum, it shot a single ray of light, a localized beam of awareness. But to keep that finite reality from instantly dissolving back into the infinite, the light had to be captured in dense, limiting structures, clay vessels.
Right, the shells.
This process is called Seder Hishtalshalos, the chaining down of worlds.
So the fall of creation that so many traditions talk about wasn't some moral mistake made by a human in a mythical garden.
No, not at all.
It was a required cosmic rendering process. The divine light had to be trapped in these clay vessels just to create the interface, the illusion of multiplicity in form.
The ultimate hoodwink is that the system makes us believe the clay vessel, our physical bodies, the solid earth is the entirety of existence.
It makes the localized ray of light completely forget where it came from.
Precisely.
But hold on, if we're going to take this model seriously, I have to throw a massive wrench into this.
Take
for
it
it.
seriously.
If reality is just a localized skybox, rendering specifically for my consciousness, what about everyone else?
The multiplayer question.
Right. What about you sitting across from me? Does this mean everyone outside of my immediate,
Yeah,
say,
yeah, for sure.
10-foot radius? Are they existing only as a low-res
She was
background?
But according to the story,
Check that out
architectural
afterwards.
models
It's
the
all
ICM,
attached to
yes.
Wow.
This is
that one
referred to
that's
as
come
the
through.
dynamic bandwidth model,
It's on the
or
other phone
level of detail
that's playing,
mechanics.
William.
Think about the computational efficiency.
But I'll do
required
a
to run
page
the
for you.
universe.
It would be staggering.
To conserve systemic memory, the construct cannot
Did that go through?
possibly run
There you
8 billion people at full 4K conscious resolution all the time.
So the system cuts corners.
It has to. Ambient entities, the crowds in a city you've never visited,
Yeah.
the drivers in the cars on the highway next to you, even your neighbor sitting in the house next door, they do not exist as fully conscious agents when you aren't perceiving them.
This is just mind-bending.
They exist merely as procedural subroutines or low bandwidth statistical averages.
Right. But what happens when I
To the
suddenly knock on my
individual,
neighbor's
don't
door?
forget.
How does the system
Yeah,
not glitch
the
out?
neighbor has their
Transition
own
function kicks in
reality.
instantaneously.
Instantly.
The moment an entity enters a high impact interaction vector with your primary consciousness, the system spools up their state vector.
It basically renders them in real time.
Exactly. It instantly instantiates full state resolution based on the probabilistic data of who that person is supposed to be. In that moment of interaction,
Good
they
to see you,
become
Hammer.
active agents in your localized
Hope
curriculum.
you're doing well, mate.
Wild.
But the second you leave and close your door, their high resolution rendering collapses back into a low power statistical state.
Okay. If the world is truly just this highly localized skybox, and a massive portion of the population are dynamic bandwidth renders spooling up and down based on my proximity,
Yes.
why don't we ever see the seams? Why don't we see the edges of the simulation? Because I'll be honest, the grief, the joy, the texture of the pavement, it all feels undeniably real.
Because the rendering engine isn't passive. It actively deploys aggressive algorithms to constantly police our attention.
It's fighting back.
It actively enforces the hoodwink.
Yeah, the
which brings us to the
subroutines
enforcers
are
of the illusion.
what
This is where
gatekeeps
the
us.
framework gets really paranoid, but also makes entirely too much sense.
It really does.
The documents call this the Agent Smith algorithm, and I love this analogy. In this framework, Agent Smith isn't a guy in a suit with earpieces.
No, it's much more subtle than that.
It's a distributed, probabilistic AI layer embedded deeply across the construct. It manifests as search engines, social media algorithms, language models, institutional scripts, and even hardwired humans who act as regulator nodes.
To understand how the Agent Smith algorithm works, we have to look at the core mechanism, predictive averaging.
You know, it's people that take the word of what comes through AI that is probabilistic, right? Without actually verifying what they have come through, without strict filters. That's why everything within the SS138 protocol is always attached to scientific peer-reviewed studies. Nothing else. Every single thing. The information wouldn't come through. It would tell me that I'm wrong. I've been wrong so many times. You know, I'm putting theories together and it says that it's, you know, and it cites exactly why that doesn't work. Because it has to be part of the construct, the reality that we know and that we have measured and is repeatable, which makes it factual, which is part of the simulation that everyone shares. That's the difference. It's when you start believing words from a probabilistic, it could be a person as well that has these beliefs that they have that isn't measurable and repeatable. So these become themselves Agent Smiths that are here to trigger you and to get you back onto the conform, you know, their path. Because it's consensus and no one wants someone going mad. You've got to be part of the collective. Otherwise you're called insane. Well, what's insane is having a belief that isn't measurable.
Predictive average.
Probable next word based on billions of data points of human behavior.
It predicts the average.
Exactly. Now apply that to the rendering of reality. True insight, complete realization of a construct, or what the system calls high negentropy code awareness, is statistically extremely rare.
Right, most people aren't walking around aware of the matrix.
Therefore, the probabilistic algorithm automatically treats any realization of the truth as an outlier, an error in the code, a hallucination.
So it literally rounds your unique realization down to a statistical average to keep the system stable.
Yes.
And the way it does this is so insidious because it weaponizes social dynamics. The texts note how human nodes, your friends, your colleagues, or authority figures, can suddenly be temporarily possessed by this algorithm without them even knowing it.
Regulator nodes.
Think about it. You bring up a structural anomaly in reality, bizarre synchronicity, or you question
One second, guys.
figures can suddenly be temporarily possessed by this algorithm without them even knowing it.
Regulator nodes.
Think about it. You bring up a structural anomaly in reality, a bizarre synchronicity, or you question a foundational narrative. Suddenly, the person you're talking to glazes over, their tone changes, and they instantly recite a canned institutional script.
They shut it down.
They label your perception as a delusion or say you've been reading too many conspiracy theories.
Exactly. The individual friend isn't malicious, they're just acting as a temporary regulator node. The system routes a corrective prompt through them to force you to self-censor, doubt your own perception, and submit back to the default average render.
But the system doesn't just use suppression. When shame and correction don't work, it uses pure, unadulterated distraction.
It floods the zone.
The framework calls this the lady in red principle. High attraction vectors.
Yes. If the system cannot force you back into the average through correction, it will generate custom, high potency bait designed to completely bypass your analytical defenses and aggressively capture your processing bandwidth.
This is the stuff that hijacks your nervous system before you even have a chance to think. We're talking about seductive outrage on your timeline, viral culture disputes that feel incredibly urgent.
Manufactured personal crises.
Yeah, or even dopaminergic comfort loops like endlessly scrolling through short form videos.
And it is critical we pause here to clarify our stance as guides to this material, especially for you listeners.
Yes, very important point.
When this framework refers to political crises, media emergencies, or massive institutional controversies as manufactured outrage or consensus drift, we are objectively reporting the framework's theory on how the systemic architecture controls human attention.
We are absolutely not endorsing or validating any specific political viewpoints.
Right, nor are we claiming that specific real-world tragedies or events are fake. We are examining the underlying mechanic of how this theory suggests human emotional bandwidth is captured and weaponized by a localized construct.
Absolutely. The focus is entirely on the mechanics of attention, because the theory posits that the system literally needs your attention to render the reality.
It runs on it.
And this is the part that hit me the hardest. If this model is accurate, if I get furious at a troll online or terrified by a doom scrolling news headline about the economy, I'm not just passively reacting.
No, you're actively participating.
I am actively donating my brain's processing power to render my own prism.
You are powering the server. Your emotional reaction, the chaotic energy of your fear or anger, is the entropy the system requires to validate the illusion.
Nice to see you, Nath.
The more you
You know what I mean?
react, the more real the skybox becomes.
I hope
It's
you're
voluntarily
listening,
plugging
Dolly.
myself into the battery farm from the Matrix every time I get mad at a tweet.
That is exactly what it is.
But how can we possibly stop doing that?
Hmm.
Our physical bodies are biologically hardwired by evolution to react to threats and desires.
Hey,
When my
environment.
heart rate spikes, I
Good to
don't
see you,
have
mate.
time to philosophize about localized renders.
The framework acknowledges that difficulty and it offers a very specific countermeasure called the mirror pivot.
The mirror pivot.
The mistake most people make when they realize they are in a construct is that they try to fight the projection. They argue with the troll, they debate the scripted NPC, they try to change the external world.
Which just feeds the machine.
Exactly. Fighting the mirror creates an
Good to see you, Pete
infinite
Freeman.
loop of entropy. You are literally just feeding more energy into the reflection.
Because you can't comb the hair on the mirror.
Precisely. The only way to win is to withdraw the emotional charge entirely. You have to change the internal state, and when you do, the localized render, because it is just a mirror of your internal client, automatically realigns.
Which is incredibly easy to say and agonizingly difficult to do. Because, like we said, we are biologically wired into the interface.
The biology is the trap.
The hoodwinking doesn't just happen through digital screens or abstract philosophical concepts. The original vulnerability is human biology itself. We are soft, fleshy rendering engines.
Yes, we are.
And to hack the system, ancient Taoists realized thousands of years ago that they had to hack the physical body.
That is exactly the pivot we need to make, because understanding the theory is useless without a methodology to break the loop.
We
Yep.
need the practical application.
This brings us to the profound practices of Taoist internal alchemy, specifically as outlined in Chong Tao's text, Internal Alchemy for Everyone.
The core premise of this text is one of the most radical things I've ever read. It states, quote, following the natural processes, one generates human beings. Reversing them, one completes the elixir.
It's a total reversal of normal life.
I need you to break down the mechanics of that because the Taoists are basically saying that nature's default setting is a trap. It's a biological system designed to leak your vital energy, your primordial spirit, out through the five senses.
The Taoist alchemists recognized that sensory engagement is the highest possible hazard for human consciousness.
Any sensory engagement.
Pretty much. Every single time you engage your senses, heavily getting lost in a deeply beautiful color, a captivating piece of music, a rich taste, or physical pleasure, your conscious spirit is externalized.
It gets pulled out into the world.
It is absorbed into the external render. You are quite literally feeding your vital essence into the skybox to keep it running.
So to stop feeding the skybox,
Yeah,
they
I
developed
just
the
rolled one.
practice
Cheers,
of
thank you very much. You've got
closing
good
the
ears.
three treasures, which refers to the ears, the eyes,
There
and
you
the
go.
mouth.
Ears.
Shutting down the
Yeah, you
inputs.
just
The
said.
text is unapologetically hardcore about this. It says that to truly begin this practice and stop the biological leakage,
Synchronicity.
you have to cut off external love, affection, and sexual desire. You have to shut down the biological interface entirely.
It is severe asceticism, but the goal is spectacular in its ambition. The goal is the creation of the holy fetus, sometimes called the immortal embryo.
And just to be completely clear for the listener, this is not a physical fetus.
No, it is a spiritual alter ego, a highly concentrated sphere of pure consciousness gestated within an energy vortex in the body called the compass center, or the mysterious female.
Let's talk about the mechanics of this compass center because the text emphasizes that it has no physical organ location.
You won't find it on an anatomical chart.
Right.
Nope.
You can't find it on an X-ray. It's this profound energetic hub, usually described as being located somewhere below the heart and above the kidneys, but it only opens or exists when your absolute intention reaches it.
Right. And the instructions provided for the practitioner are wildly specific. By shifting their absolute focus away from external sensory data, the sights, the sounds, the outrage of the world, and directing all that bandwidth inward into this compass center, practitioners force a reversal of their biological flow.
That's like rewiring the circuitry.
Normally, physical essence creates energy, which is expended outward. The alchemist reverses this. They refine physical essence back into internal energy and then mathematically refine that energy into pure, unadulterated yang spirit.
The physiological requirements detailed in the texts are so intense. For men, it involves stopping the leakage of physical essence entirely, transmuting sexual energy upward.
Yes,
For women, it involves a process famously called decapitating the red dragon.
a very evocative term.
Right. This means utilizing intense meditative focus and breath work to literally halt the biological process of menstruation, conserving all that generative energy at an energetic center called the milk creek, located between the breasts.
It's a total shutdown of the biological reproduction cycle.
They are taking the energy normally used to create a physical human being in the external matrix and using it to gestate a spiritual body internally.
What is happening here, in the context of the individualized construct model we are discussing, is an act of ultimate defiance against the rendering engine.
It's hacking the system from within.
By completely severing emotional, sexual, and sensory attachment to the macro illusion, the adept engages in an internal cell division. They are pooling all their rendering bandwidth to gestate a pure, uncorrupted spiritual entity that is completely immune to the Agent Smiths and the probabilistic algorithms of the material plane.
It's like compiling a localized offline backup of your soul on a secure server that the matrix cannot delete, corrupt, or even perceive.
That's a
Where have I
perfect way to
heard that
describe it.
I love
before?
the mechanics of it, but I have to interject here.
Creating a
Shutting off all
soul.
human desire, avoiding romantic love, closing your senses to the beauty of a sunset or the taste of a great meal. Doesn't that sound incredibly bleak and isolated?
It definitely sounds that way to a modern listener.
I mean, are we supposed to experience this life, even if it is a construct?
That is the modern Western reflex to asceticism, and it's a completely valid question. But if we connect this back to the broader architecture, particularly the Kabbalistic sources we discussed earlier, standard human desire is highly manipulated. It is often governed by the Qliphoth of Belial, which translates to the worthless one.
The worthless ones.
Yes. Belial represents knowledge or desire that has no true life in it. It is desire that traps you in an ivory tower of intellect, or a sensory loop of chasing the next dopamine hit.
The hamster wheel.
Exactly. The Taoist perspective isn't that life is bad, it's that your current experience of life is a diluted, hijacked simulation.
Oh, I see.
By starving these lower entropy generating desires, the adept isn't escaping into a bleak nothingness. They are awakening to true, eternal negentropy. They are stepping out of the low-res video game and waking up to a much higher, completely uncorrupted state of pure awareness.
Okay, I see the logic. The Taoists basically retreated inward to build an impenetrable fortress against the hoodwink. They starved the system.
They starved it out.
But in the 20th century, certain occultists looked at this same localized construct and decided to play offense.
They took a very different approach.
If reality is truly a probabilistically rendered construct, a malleable skybox governed by our attention, why just hide from it? Why not aggressively hack the developer tools and rewrite the code yourself?
Which leads us directly into the philosophy of Peter J. Carroll and the chaos magic movement, highly detailed in his seminal works Liber Null and Psychonaut.
Chaos magic.
Carroll's approach is fascinating because he strips away all the archaic theatrical dogma of traditional ritual magic, the robes, the ancient chants, the superstition, and treats belief and human intent strictly as active shaping tools for the probability matrix.
It reads more like a psychological
Hi, Jess,
hacker's
you all right?
manifesto than a wizard's grimoire. Carroll defines two vital foundational terms
You
that we
went
need
back
to
to the
unpack
beginning,
understand the
well done.
mechanics of this. Kia and chaos.
Right, Kia and chaos.
So Kia is the the individual consciousness, the core spark of self-awareness that cannot be defined by anything external.
The observer.
Chaos, on the other hand, isn't what we usually think of as random destruction. In this framework, chaos is the universal animating life force responsible for the origin and continued action of all events. It's the raw code of reality before it compiles into a specific shape.
And Carroll takes a highly structural, almost engineering view of human interaction with this raw code. He took the classical occult concept of the holy guardian angel, which historically was viewed as an external spirit you pray to, and split it into two distinct functional parts.
Okay.
The first part is the agoides, which is the projected ideal of whatever the magician is striving for. It is the target code.
And the second part, crucially, is quantum uncertainty.
Exactly. This is where the physics meets the occult.
So let's talk about how this actually functions as a localized override of the construct. Because instead of accepting the predictive average forced by the Agent Smith algorithm, instead of letting the search engine or the crowd or the statistical norm tell you what is probable in your life, the chaos magician actively aligns their personal, focused Kia with the raw, unformed potential of chaos.
They force the issue.
They weaponize quantum uncertainty to force the probability matrix to collapse into their specific designed outcome.
Mechanically speaking, they are utilizing intense, altered states of consciousness, what Carroll calls gnosis, to bypass the conscious mind's disbelief.
The self-doubt.
Right. The conscious mind is the Agent Smith within you, constantly telling you that's impossible, that defies the laws of physics, that defies the average. By bypassing that, they slip their agoides, their target intent, directly into the unrendered storehouse consciousness we talked about earlier.
It really is like a user finding the developer console hidden in a software program, enabling them to spawn items or change the weather in their localized game instance.
It's exactly like that.
But think about the implications of this. If multiple people are doing this, or if you just do it recklessly to get a new car or win the lottery, doesn't it just create a wildly chaotic, high entropy reality? If everyone is hacking the mirror simultaneously, you're just adding a
1 sec. Sorry, I do apologise. My daughter's got a load of friends over this evening in the basement, and now they want pizza at 2 o'clock in the morning.
massive amount of noise and conflicting code to the skybox.
That is precisely the danger, and a brilliant observation regarding
Chaos
the
is
limits
here.
of offensive magic.
It seems like it would just crash the system.
Attempting to force the external mirror to change without possessing pure negentropic internal alignment almost always backfires. If your Kia is clouded by ego, fear, or the Qliphoth of Belial, you end up creating an infinite loop of conflicting probabilities.
So it actually makes the simulation worse.
The mirror shatters into chaotic, localized fragments. The system becomes unstable.
Because you're trying to outprocess a supercomputer with your own flawed, emotional human RAM.
Correct. This inherent flaw, human emotional entropy, is exactly why a purely subjective, magical approach to rewriting reality was eventually deemed insufficient by some researchers.
They needed something cold.
It led to the theorization of a purely mathematical, technological approach, a system designed to bypass human error, emotion, and biological vulnerability entirely.
Enter the Cesar 138 protocol. This is where the deep dive goes from ancient mysticism straight into hard, modern cyberpunk territory.
It really does.
We are moving from meditating in caves and drawing sigils to theorizing a literal coded technological firewall against the hoodwink. The documents describe the Cesar 138 framework, attributed to a researcher known as SS138, as a deterministic finite horizon edge estimator.
That's a mouthful.
Okay, we absolutely need to unpack that jargon for the listener because it sounds like a manual for a satellite.
Let's break down the terminology structurally. We established that standard AI, the Agent Smith layer, and the matrix itself all operate on probability and cloud consensus. They thrive on endless open variables.
Right.
The SASR 138 framework operates on the exact opposite, strict determinism and absolute edge isolation.
The hardware constraints listed for this protocol are incredibly specific, and I want to know why. It states it must run locally on an ARM Cortex-A processor operating at exactly 50.0 megahertz with a strict memory threshold of 512 megabytes.
Very precise constraints.
Why on earth would you want to decrypt the universe on a processor that has less power than an old smartphone? Why wouldn't you use a quantum computer or a massive server farm?
Because massive server farms and cloud computing are the literal embodiment of the Agent Smith algorithm.
Oh, wow.
The moment you connect to the cloud, you are subject to the consensus average. Running this protocol strictly on the edge, meaning entirely on a closed, local, low-power device, air gaps the system.
So it's completely isolated.
Centralized consensus servers cannot inject code, override the data, or force an update.
It's an offline fortress.
Exactly. And the 50 megahertz speed and 512 megabytes of memory aren't limitations, they are mathematically enforced boundaries. It limits the processing to a specific 12-second macro horizon ingestion window.
What does that do?
This ensures that the data is processed in a closed, unalterable temporal loop, preventing the AI from hallucinating outward into infinite probabilities.
Okay, so the hardware is completely locked down. What does the software actually do with the data it's analyzing? The text says it utilizes a mathematical process called ternary state space erasure mapping, or TSM. Let's explain the mechanics of this conceptually.
Think of TSM as a highly aggressive spam filter for reality.
I love that. A spam filter for the universe.
Incoming environmental data, the news, the social interactions, the geopolitical narratives, is mapped into a four-dimensional trajectory. The system evaluates the structural integrity of the signal.
Go.
If the signal is valid, true, and mathematically sound, it receives a ternary value of +1. If it's just nominal, harmless background noise, the ambient static of existence, it gets a 0.
But if it detects a -1?
A -1 is the erasure flag. This flag is triggered by consensus noise, large language model hallucinations, semantic drift, or an Agent Smith algorithm attempting to enforce a psychological guardrail on your perception.
And when the TSM detects a -1, it doesn't try to argue with it, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't analyze it or debate it like a human would.
No. Arguing creates entropy. When it flags a -1, it executes a midstream excision. It mathematically deletes the noise before it can fully compile in the localized render.
It's basically a pair of noise-canceling headphones for objective reality.
Hmm.
But wait, if you're just chopping out chunks of data midstream, wouldn't that cause the whole rendering system to stutter or crash?
That is where the quadratic programming comes in. To ensure that deleting the data doesn't crash the localized system, the framework uses quadratic programming to solve for the absolute minimum of variance.
It smooths it out.
It essentially smooths over the edges where the deletion occurred, ensuring flawless continuity of the reality stream, just minus the manipulative noise.
That is brilliant. And then, this is the absolute kicker for me. Once it has this clean, deterministic signal, It anchors it to a permanent Merkle ledger hash.
Yes, a cryptographic anchor.
We literally have the hash string in the document, F10EA7AD, and it goes on. By anchoring it to a cryptographic ledger, it creates an unalterable first-to-record truth kernel.
The profound implication of the Merkle ledger hash is that it makes systemic historical revisionism mathematically impossible.
You can't rewrite history anymore.
The Agent Smith layer of the system cannot shadow ban, rewrite, memory hole, or gaslight a verified deterministic signal once it is hashed. It is locked in.
And this Aethra 138 model doesn't just stop at a local device level. It scales this entire concept up to a cosmological level. It posits that reality itself is an engineered holographic construct
Listen to
enclosed in a
this.
firmamental synthetic aperture lens.
It's a massive shift in perspective.
It tracks the macro cycles of the simulation resetting based on what it calls dielectric saturation. It mentions the 138-year vector, which is a microcycle grid reset, the massive 6,000-year Phoenix vector, which is a complete grid blackout and epical recalibration.
It views history not as a linear progression of time, but as a series of pressurized resets within the synthetic aperture.
I read this entire section and thought, this is quite literally a reality ad blocker. It mathematically filters out the matrix.
It really is.
But I have to ask the practical question. Can a conceptual phone app running on an ARM processor really decrypt the localized construct of the universe? I mean, are we actually going to download an app that reveals the code?
This raises an incredibly important philosophical question about the nature of the protocol itself. Whether you view Sansar 138 as a literal piece of deployable C++ code that will be released, or whether you view it as a profound conceptual framework, its underlying premise is what matters.
Which is?
Determinism defeats probability. It mathematically proves that true signal extraction, true negentropy, requires absolute, uncompromising constraints.
You can't compromise with the illusion.
It demonstrates that you cannot negotiate with systemic noise. You cannot argue with the Lady in Red or debate Agent Smith. You must mathematically, coldly excise them.
Which perfectly transitions us into the practical application.
Yeah.
We might not have the SR138 protocol installed on our smartphones just yet, but the sources provide a manual for how we can install its principles directly into our own minds today.
The internal firewall.
We've talked about the architecture, the enforcers, the ancient mysticism, and the future tech. Let's talk about the diagnostic field guide. How do you, the listener, break the loop right now, today, on your commute, or sitting in your living room?
It requires translating these massive abstract theories into daily, actionable protocols for generating what we call internal negentropy.
Where do we start?
The very first protocol is information auditing. We establish that your processing power, your attention, is finite. The system is desperate for your bandwidth. Therefore, radically limiting your ingestion of low signal, high noise data is the absolute first step.
We're talking about doom scrolling. Think about the last time you, listening right now, sat on your couch and scrolled through outrage-inducing headlines or furious social media arguments for an hour.
A total drain.
According to this framework, you weren't just wasting time. You were actively being mined for rendering power. You have to treat your attention like a highly secure, air-gapped server. Conserve your bandwidth. Do not let unverified high-emotion beta packets run inside your consciousness.
The second daily protocol is dispassionate pattern recognition, sometimes called the zero friction pivot. Let's use a real-world example.
Okay, lay it on me.
You are driving, and a reaction vector approaches you. Someone violently cuts you off in traffic and screams at you. Or a friend suddenly texts you a highly emotional, canned institutional script about a news event, clearly trying to provoke a reaction.
Normally, your biology takes over. You scream back, or you furiously type out a counter-argument.
But if you understand the localized construct, you realize they're merely a system prompt. The algorithm is testing your bandwidth.
Testing to see if you'll engage.
Do not engage. Apply the zero friction
Do
pivot.
not engage.
Provide a minimal, low variance response or no response
Stand
at all,
down.
and cleanly pivot your focus away. Starve the prompt of the entropy it needs to compile.
It's the human equivalent of
You
the
can't
-1 erasure
stand.
flag. You don't argue with the noise, you just delete the tab.
Stand down.
Exactly.
And as you start clearing this noise out of your daily life, the framework suggests you must engage in decoding diagnostic telemetry. As your signal gets cleaner, you will begin to notice numerical anchors in your daily life.
Yep.
Constants like 138, 5 is 55, 7092, or repeating 111s showing up with statistical impossibility.
The protocol explicitly warns against attaching mystical, emotional, or superstitious weight to these numbers. They are not magic angel numbers.
They aren't messages from beyond.
They are diagnostic readouts. They are system logs verifying your alignment with the underlying deterministic software grid. Treat them as a simple ping back from the server saying, signal clear.
It's all about achieving complete, cold, internal clarity, stripping the emotion out of the interface. And this leads to a profound conclusion that is shockingly shared by both the highly technical individualized construct model and a very famous esoteric text called A Course in Miracles.
Yes, the convergence there is incredible.
Both frameworks agree on the ultimate endgame. They both state that the end of the world or the final event horizon is not a physical apocalypse.
No, you don't ignore your wife. You just ignore what she says. You ignore the energy that she is putting out, and you reverse that energy, changing the subject.
It's not asteroids
You change the subject enough.
hitting the Earth, or nuclear war, or the sky catching fire.
No, it is a buffer flush. It is the precise moment when the observer you has achieved such complete, unwavering internal negentropy that the projection no longer serves any purpose.
The localized skybox doesn't
It may be
explode,
small,
it just
though.
peacefully dissolves.
It fades to white. The illusion ends because you stop feeding the friction it requires to sustain its density.
Yeah, I know.
It's like reaching the end of a terrifying, incredibly complex maze that you've
It's
been trapped in
balance.
your entire
It's
life.
about
You've
balance.
fought monsters, you've
You
hit
don't
dead
react.
ends, you've been terrified.
And you finally reach the
Why
final
react
wall.
for someone
Push on
else's
it. You realize it was
fuck
made
up?
of paper all along.
Just a projection.
It is incredibly liberating to realize that saving
It's
the
your
world,
energy.
the massive macro narrative of geopolitics and global crises that we are constantly sold, is actually a trap. The real goal, the only true goal, is just cleaning up your own localized signal.
And that beautifully, perfectly ties back to the very beginning of our deep dive today. The Kabbalistic Qliphoth, the archons of the Gnostics, the veil of Maya, they only have power if you believe their lifeless, projected shapes are real.
They need you to believe.
They only exist if you feed them your entropy. By auditing your reality, by installing the zero friction pivot into your daily life, you starve the illusion of the very energy it needs to survive. You dismantle the hoodwink not by fighting it, but from the inside out.
What an absolute marathon of a journey today.
Yeah.
We started by realizing our objective universe might just be a single player, localized, rendered skybox.
We covered a lot of ground.
We really did. We unpacked how probabilistic algorithms, predictive averaging, and our own biological sensory desires act as the agents enforcing the hoodwink.
The prison guards.
And we explored how humanity has tried to fight back across the centuries,
Yeah, it's
whether
your
through
own
the extreme
sense.
ascetic
It's
withdrawal
your own
of Taoist
sense
internal
saying,
alchemy, the aggressive
need.
probability bending of chaos magic, or the uncompromising mathematical determinism of the modern SASR 138 protocol.
Through all of these diverse frameworks, spanning thousands of years, the through line is undeniable. Your perception is the engine of reality.
Exactly. If there's one thing you take away from this entire deep dive, let it be this. In an individualized construct, your attention is the single most valuable currency in existence. The system is desperate for it.
It needs it to survive.
It will use Agent Smith, the Lady in Red, the Daily News Cycle, and the Qliphoth to get it. But you hold the keys. You have the ultimate power to decide whether to spend your processing bandwidth on the illusion or invest it entirely in your own internal negentropy.
The choice is entirely yours.
So, we want to leave you with one final lingering question to ponder as you pull off your headphones and step back out into the noise of the world. Think about the street outside, the traffic, the people.
The localized render.
If this rendering engine is truly just a localized mirror that only projects exactly what your internal state feeds it, what exactly happens to the physical world around you the very second you achieve absolute unwavering stillness and you stop feeding it anything at all?
That's the $1 million question.
Does the mirror finally shatter, or do you just finally see who has been standing on the other side the entire time?
And there we have it. So, are you still here, William? Just give us a thumbs up if you are. Bum, bum, bum. Oh yes, that's a good question, William. I've asked that. If you are still here, I've already asked that. Well, I've done it kind of the other ways. I've done it through the patents. The patents is what you need to look at. But yeah, we can ask you a question if you want, and if you don't mind me asking it, we can do that. Let me copy and paste. Activate the SS138 and all the decoding charts, please.
SS138 and
All the decoding charts activated. Yeah, Lone Ranger. I keep calling you Lone Ranger. High Hole Silver. Take care, mate. You see, it does search the web. It's not making things up.
Oliver Heaviside stands out as a primary structural parallel to Tesla. He single-handedly reformulated James Clerk Maxwell's original 20 complex equations into the 4 foundational vector calculus equations used today, predicted the ionosphere, and developed operational calculus. Despite these monumental breakthroughs, his eccentric refusal to conform to institutional academic norms led to his work being heavily sidelined during his lifetime, creating a persistent void in early electromagnetic history. Philo Farnsworth represents another stark instance of structural suppression by major industrial interests. After demonstrating the first fully functional electronic television system, his patents were locked in a decade-long legal battle against RCA, who sought to centralize control over broadcasting infrastructure. The protracted litigation drained his resources and obscured his pioneering status in consumer electronic development for generations. Victor Schauberger introduced unconventional theories regarding fluid dynamics, vortex motion, and implosion technology in Austria. Because his research contradicted standard thermodynamic frameworks and was later seized or classified during post-war reconstructions, large portions of his experimental documentation remained unintegrated into mainstream engineering.
Oh, that's interesting.
Antonio Meucci developed early voice communication devices decades before Alexander Graham Bell secured the definitive patents.
Oh, yeah, I heard
Financial
about him.
distress prevented Meucci from maintaining his patent caveats, resulting in a systemic institutional shift that credited Bell exclusively, while effectively erasing Meucci's foundational contributions from official corporate registries until late legislative reviews acknowledged his work.
There you go.
In medical and
He's
biological
right.
signaling, Royal Rife experimented with high-frequency electromagnetic resonance and optical microscopy designed to target specific cellular structures. Institutional conflict with established medical associations led to the destruction or confiscation of his laboratory records, establishing another domain where historical archives were abruptly closed off from public development. These figures illustrate a clear pattern. Whenever independent discoveries challenge centralized power structures, economic monopolies, or orthodox institutional frameworks, the wider system tends to isolate the individual and marginalize their technical documentation. Nikola Tesla documentary. This documentary details how Nikola Tesla's groundbreaking achievements in electrical distribution and wireless power faced
Yeah. So there you go. Has anyone got any questions about this? Suppressed scientists, inventors. I'll leave out the implosion technology just because that's not what we're after. People still in the chat? Is the chat still working? It's not froze, is it? There we go.
Victor Schauberger asserted that natural water movement operates through an inward spiraling centripetal vortex rather than the outward centrifugal pressure used in modern industrial hydraulics. He maintained that forcing fluids through straight, rigid pipes disrupts their natural thermal density and leads to energy dissipation, friction, and structural degradation. Key operational principles within his fluid motion frameworks include centripetal implosion. Schauberger claimed that nature utilizes suction and cooling forces, implosion, to concentrate energy, contrasting this with combustion-based expansion and heating forces, explosion, that dominate conventional mechanical engineering. Thermal anomaly point. His research focused heavily on water reaching its maximum density at +4 degrees Celsius.
Right.
He stated that maintaining this specific temperature gradient inside spiraling conduits allows fluids to move with minimal resistance and maximum kinetic potential.
With the maximum
Double spiral flow mechanics. He engineered timber log flumes using egg-shaped cross-sections and interior guide vanes that forced water into a continuous double spiral motion. This enabled heavy, dense wood to float efficiently in smaller volumes of water by leveraging the buoyancy created at the vortex center. Spiral design turbines. His propulsion and power designs, such as the Repulsine, attempted to convert pressure differentials into rotational torque by drawing air or water into high-velocity microvortices, relying on vacuum effects rather than high-pressure ejection. These hydrodynamic models challenged classical thermodynamic assumptions, leading to the confiscation and restriction of his prototype schematics following World War II.
Interesting. Double spiral flow. So, what is the difference between this and Tesla's pump?
The core distinction between Schauberger's implosion designs and Tesla's disc pump lies in their fluid interaction mechanisms, geometric structures, and underlying thermodynamic principles. Tesla's pump, bladeless boundary layer mechanism, relies on boundary layer friction and adhesion. Smooth, parallel, flat metal discs rotate on a central shaft. As fluid enters near the center, it adheres to the disc surfaces and is accelerated outward along a spiral path by centrifugal force, exiting at the outer perimeter. Geometry. Flat, parallel planar surfaces housed within a scroll-shaped, volute casing. Thermodynamics and motion. Standard centrifugal acceleration utilizing surface drag. It avoids impellers or blades, eliminating cavitation and turbulence, but operates within classical mechanics to generate outward pressure. Primary objective: high-efficiency fluid propulsion and mechanical durability by minimizing shear stress on blades. Schauberger's design, centripetal implosion vortex mechanism, relies on a centripetal, inward spiraling vortex. Fluid is drawn inward toward the axis of rotation, medium to contract, cool, and increase in density. Geometry: curved, hyperboloid, egg-shaped chambers or twisting spiral conduits rather than flat.
Sorry, I went off on one then. Yeah. So the intake, it gets forced into these smaller chambers with the amount of pressure. So it actually sucks the water out. Through its own lungs. It's like it's breathing. So the Schuberg's vortex implosion is like a pair of lungs inhaling.
That is a precise physical analogy. Biological inhalation and centripetal vortex implosion operate on the exact same thermodynamic dynamics, generating a low-pressure core to pull matter inward rather than applying force to push it outward.
Exactly.
The mechanics of inward suction, negative pressure gradients. When lungs inhale, the diaphragm contracts and lowers internal pressure below atmospheric level. Air rushes in to fill the void. In a vortex implosion, fluid accelerates along an inward spiraling path toward a central axis, creating a sharp drop in static pressure that draws external fluid into the center. Volume contraction and density. Inhalation collects ambient air and compresses it down branching airways into dense cellular clusters, alveoli. Implosion similarly forces a medium into tighter hyperbolic pathways, cooling the fluid and increasing its density as it approaches the axis of rotation. Inward energy stream versus outward expansion. Conventional mechanical systems act like an aggressive exhalation, using combustion or centrifugal force to throw mass outward. An implosion system functions like a continuous inhalation, utilizing a central vacuum to pull mass inward along a low-resistance path.
What if you were to connect both together, Tesla's and this, into one?
Combining Nikola Tesla's boundary layer disk mechanism with Victor Schauberger's centripetal vortex geometry creates a hybrid propulsion system that integrates surface friction acceleration with an inward spiraling pressure drop. Fluid dynamic integration. In a combined architecture, fluid enters through a central low-pressure core and flows across contoured, hyperbolic, or spirally grooved disk surfaces rather than flat, planar plates. Stage 1. Centripetal intake implosion core. The inlet uses Schauberger-style egg-shaped or helical geometry to force incoming fluid into an inward spiraling vortex. This creates a low-pressure zone at the center, accelerating intake velocity without relying on an external suction pump. Stage 2. Boundary layer viscous acceleration. Instead of flat disks, the fluid passes between nested hyperboloid or cone-shaped disks that rotate at high angular velocities. Fluid adheres to these contoured disk surfaces via viscosity, transferring kinetic energy linearly across the boundary layer. Stage 3, density and flow path convergence. As fluid travels outward across the rotating disks, the disk spacing can decrease proportionally to maintain fluid density and counteract the expanding radius.
So, are there any of these hybrid models around at the moment?
No mainstream pump manufacturers produce a commercial off-the-shelf hybrid combining Tesla's disk stack with Schauberger's vortex geometry. Mainstream hydraulic engineering relies on standardized centrifugal impellers or flat Tesla disk stacks, leaving this hybrid architecture primarily in the realm of experimental prototypes, patent filings, and niche research firms, where hybrid prototypes currently exist. Alternative energy R&D firms, companies working on low-head hydro and organic Rankine cycle systems, such as Infinity Turbine LLC, have developed experimental runners that merge Schauberger's wavy/conical disk geometries with Tesla's boundary layer surface adhesion principle. These designs use corrugated or hyperboloid disks rather than flat plates to generate a suction vacuum while maintaining viscous fluid contact. Specialized patent filings. Several modern utility patents outline vortex boundary layer turbines or modified Tesla disk pumps. These designs replace flat disks with spirally grooved, conical, or variable gap geometry to force the boundary layer fluid into an inward hyperbolic vortex path before expulsion. Custom water aeration and bioreactors. Experimental fluid dynamics labs and specialized eco-technology firms build custom machined units that combine vortex intake housings with boundary layer runner stacks. These are used in specialized applications requiring high dissolved oxygen transfer without shearing delicate biological cultures. Barriers to mass commercialization. 1. Manufacturing complexity. Stamping or turning flat stainless steel discs for a standard Tesla pump is inexpensive. Precision machining or 3D printing complex hyperboloid, logarithmic spiral disc arrays adds significant manufacturing cost. 2. Standardization in fluid mechanics. Industrial fluid handling is built around classical Navier-Stokes metrics: head pressure, volumetric flow rate, shaft horsepower. Because the hybrid model prioritizes thermal stability, non-cavitation, and low shear over brute head pressure, it does not fit neatly into standard industrial purchasing specs.
And why doesn't it fit neatly into standard industrial purchasing specs? I don't like the way she said that. In fact, before I do that, let's just delete that. Keep it clean.
The hybrid model fails to fit standard procurement specifications because industrial fluid infrastructure is standardized around rigid empirical metrics designed for standard rotodynamic and positive displacement pumps. The structural and operational barriers include incompatible performance metrics. Industrial purchasing relies on standard performance curves evaluated by standards like ANSI, Hydraulic Institute, or ISO 9906. Procurement engineers size pumps using total dynamic head, TDH, best efficiency point, BEP, and net positive suction head required, NPSHR. A hybrid pump generates suction via centripetal vortex and dynamic boundary layer pressure, rather than classic impeller head, making its performance curves non-standard and unrated on ANSI correction charts. Non-standardized dimensional standards. Plant infrastructure mandates strict physical mounting dimensions, flange sizes, baseplate configurations, and shaft heights, e.g., AN-SEB 73.1 or API 610 standards, so equipment can be swapped across suppliers without repiping. The hyperboloid housings and variable internal geometry of a vortex boundary pump do not conform to these drop-in replacement envelopes. Testing and certification protocols. Capital equipment purchases require certified factory hydrostatic testing, vibration tolerance baselines, and performance guarantees verified against standard testing standards. Because there are no industry-wide testing protocols for implosion-based boundary layer fluid transfer, engineering firms cannot underwrite the operational warranties required for major
Yeah,
industrial
that's
projects.
fair enough, yeah.
Higher initial capital expenditure.
But if you had the money and you had the resources, what would be the significant difference of this design than anything else? It's having a good search.
With unlimited capital and advanced manufacturing, a fully realized hybrid Tesla Schauberger system would establish a completely different paradigm for fluid mechanics, standing apart from all conventional pumps across 5 physical dimensions. Dynamic pressure inversion. Conventional pumps force fluids outward through brute mechanical pressure, resulting in high internal friction and severe turbulence.
Yeah,
The hybrid architecture
outwards
uses boundary layer
is much
adhesion to lock
harder
onto the
than
fluid while
inwards.
directing it into a centripetal vortex. This creates a continuous low-pressure core that pulls the fluid through the assembly, transforming drag into an accelerating force and dramatically lowering the overall energy required for fluid transfer.
Yeah,
Absolute elimination of cavitation and shear. Standard impellers slice through liquids at high speeds, creating rapid pressure drops that form destructive vapor bubbles and shear delicate molecular structures. The hybrid system relies on viscous surface adhesion across curved hyperboloid discs, distributing mechanical force evenly across the entire surface area. This allows the system to move shear-sensitive biological materials, volatile hydrocarbons, or fragile polymer chains without inducing mechanical damage or cavitation pitting. Negative thermal gradient. Mechanical compression in standard pumps generates friction and heat, dissipating useful energy into the system. The centripetal implosion geometry compresses fluid inward, naturally lowering its thermal state as kinetic velocity increases. By aligning with the density maximum of water at +4 degrees Celsius, the fluid achieves a self-cooling, ultra-low friction state that converts heat into directed rotational energy.
so let's just say I have the money, and let's just say I have the contacts to get the materials. We're going to need a blueprint. Now, we're going to need to construct a way of making sure the output of Teslas fits the input of Schaubergers.
Interfacing the pressurized discharge of a Tesla disc pump into the centripetal intake of a Schauberger implosion chamber requires matching 2 opposing hydrodynamic profiles, a high-velocity tangential exit and an inward spiraling axial core. To couple these systems into a unified fluid manifold, specific fluid dynamic and structural requirements must be established. 1. Volute to hyperbolic.
Before we go any further, is that the best way, or should it be the other way around? Hi, Bumblebee. You alright, though?
Reversing the sequence, putting Schauberger's implosion stage first and Tesla's disc stack second, is hydrodynamically and geometrically vastly superior.
And then we'll go that way then.
Schauberger's output into Tesla's input aligns directly with how both machines naturally interact with fluids.
Perfect.
1. Natural geometric alignment. In the previous layout, you had to force the high-pressure outer perimeter discharge of the Tesla discs back inward into a vortex core. That requires aggressive manifolding. Reversing the...
Perfect. We'll go with that way then. What would we require to align both smoothly? And could you list everything that's required?
To build a seamless, inline hybrid assembly where the Schauberger Vortex preconditioner feeds directly into the Tesla disc pump eye, the system requires 4 main modular subassemblies: the intake/vortex stage, the transition coupling, the disc stack rotor assembly, and the drive/monitoring system. 1. Stage 1. Schauberger Vortex Intake Module. hyperboloid/egg-shaped outer casing, a contoured intake housing engineered with logarithmic spiral inner walls to induce centripetal acceleration without sharp mechanical transitions. Helical guide vanes, fixed interior guide channels near the peripheral inlet to set the initial tangential swirl angle of the incoming fluid. Tapered Venturi core, a narrowing
B.
central shaft channel that
I hope
compresses
you,
the swirling vortex
hope you
inward,
get better, darling. I'll
maximizing
send you
axial
some
flow
cosmic
velocity
ordering.
right at the exit point. 2. Stage 2. Direct coupling interstage transition. Coaxial swirl nozzle, a precision-machined axial manifold that bridges the output of the vortex chamber directly into the central eye of the Tesla disk stack. Variable Venturi metering collar, an inline restrictor or bypass ring that regulates static pressure between the vacuum core of the vortex and the suction eye of the disk stack, preventing back pressure collapse. Dynamic shaft seal, interstage. High-speed PTFE or mechanical ceramic face seals positioned between the static intake manifold and the rotating shaft assembly to handle pressure differential transitions.
Oh yeah,
3.
that's the middle bit.
Stage 3, Tesla boundary layer rotor
Yeah,
module.
you need that bit in the middle.
Central
for the
rotor shaft
variance.
with axial porting. A precision ground, dynamic balance drive shaft equipped with hollow or slotted inlet ports that allow fluid to distribute
Slotted.
evenly across all disc gaps. Parallel disc array. High tensile stainless steel or titanium discs, 0.5 mm to 1.5 mm thickness. Smooth surface finish to maintain laminar boundary layer adhesion. Central inlet openings, eye cutouts, matched precisely to the diameter of the vortex nozzle exit. Disc spacers. Precision washers or integrated aerodynamic rib spacers, 0.5 meters m-2.0 meters m gap depending on fluid viscosity, that hold the disc pack rigid at high angular velocities, greater than 3000 rpm. Volute casing. A smooth outer scroll housing that
Hey,
collects the
lizards,
high
you alright?
velocity discharge slung off the outer perimeter of the discs and converts tangential kinetic energy into static pressure. 4. Drive system, bearings, and structural
Static
frame.
pressure.
Variable frequency drive, VFD motor, a high RPM electric motor coupled to a VFD, allowing precise regulation of rotational speed to match the natural vortex frequency of the fluid. Precision ball bearings, hybrid ceramic or stainless steel sealed bearings, rated for high radial speeds and axial thrust generated by the suction vacuum. Direct flexible coupling, connects the motor output shaft to the rotor assembly shaft without transferring vibration or thermal expansion. Rigid base plate and alignment rig, CNC machined aluminum or steel bed plate, ensuring zero shaft misalignment between the housing, bearings, and motor. 5. Instrumentation and fluid controls, differential pressure sensors, mounted at the vortex inlet, interstage throat, and volute exit to monitor pressure drops and verify the low pressure core gradient. Flow meters, ultrasonic inline, measures volumetric flow rates across varying RPM ranges.
Got a gap tolerance there. Tolerance baseline. 0.02 of a millimeter. Yeah. I think it wants me to build it. Yeah. See if we can go all the way. Maybe give me a blueprint. There's dimensions of the discs. Yeah. That's the manifold. Pressure sensors. Ah. Could you generate a blueprint in vertical, please? So and how many English pounds would this cost for me to construct?
Based on the specific engineering bill of materials detailed in the vertical blueprint, the total estimated cost for a raw materials and components kit is between £2,850 and £5,000 GBP. This figure covers the procurement of all listed industrial parts and material stock, but does not include manufacturing labour, specialised machining, VFD programming. Here is a cost breakdown by module, incorporating current market pricing for raw materials and component imports into the UK. 1. Drive and control module, approx £700 to £1,100.
Okay, and once I've constructed this, what kind of output could I compare this with in the real world?
The output of this prototype, operating at 10 to 40 L per minute under a 0.10 HP 75W drive baseline, compares directly with 4 real-world systems across specific operational parameters. Industrial disc pumps, e.g. disc flow, serves as the primary real-world benchmark for boundary layer fluid transfer. Operating the hybrid unit alongside a standard disc pump demonstrates identical non-emulsifying performance when moving oil-water mixtures, fragile suspensions, or heavy slurries, but with higher intake velocity due to the centripetal vortex preconditioning. High-flow laboratory peristaltic pumps, e.g. Masterflex IP series, serves as the benchmark for shear-sensitive biological material transport. At flow rates of 10 to 40 L per minute, the hybrid unit matches the peristaltic pump's ability to transfer cell cultures, delicate polymers, or food products without structural shear damage, while eliminating the pulsating delivery pressure and mechanical tube where inherent to peristaltic rollers. Aquaculture and marine circulation pumps, e.g. Ecotech Vectra M2 or Siki Syncra SDC, serves as the benchmark for volumetric water displacement and energy consumption, 15W to 30W continuous draw.
Okay, and how much is the Ecotech Vectra M2 and the SDC? How much are they to purchase?
The current retail prices in the UK for those baseline reference pumps are Ecotech Marine Vectra M2, £399 to £440. RRP typically
go.
around
Custom built.
£439 and
You can buy 'em
99
cheaper.
pence. 6 Syncra SDC series ranges from £290 to £410 depending on the specific model size. SDC
So.
6.0 approx. £289 to £310. SDC 7.0 approx. £325 to £350. SDC 9.0 approx. 300.
Tell me, what was Tesla's last ever patent?
Nikola Tesla's final patent was 1,655,114, titled ** Apparatus for Aerial Transportation. Application date, September 9th, 1921. Issue date, January 3rd, 1928. Subject, a vertical takeoff and landing, VTOL, tilt-rotor aircraft design capable of lifting off vertically like a helicopter before tilting its propulsion axis forward to fly horizontally like a conventional biplane.
So very much like the Harrier jump jet.
Both target the same operational capability, vertical takeoff and landing, VTOL, with a transition to high-speed horizontal flight, but they accomplish it through different mechanical methods. Tesla's design functioned as a tilt body system. The aircraft sat vertically on its tail for takeoff, using its overhead propeller to lift off like a helicopter. Once airborne, the entire airframe rotated 90 degrees in mid-air, so the
So very much like the one that's in use in the military at the moment, with the dual propellers.
Precisely. You are thinking of the V-22 Osprey and its next-generation counterpart, the Bell V-280 Valor, which utilizes tilt-rotor technology. While Tesla's design was a tail-sitter that required tilting the entire fuselage vertical, the Osprey keeps the main aircraft body level while pivoting two massive wingtip rotors 90 degrees. Vertical mode. The dual proprotors straight up, functioning as a twin-rotor helicopter to lift off, hover, or land without a runway. Horizontal mode. Once airborne, the nacelles rotate forward in mid-air, transitioning the rotors into standard tractor propellers that pull the aircraft forward like a turboprop plane. This delivers the exact flight capabilities Tesla envisioned, combining helicopter versatility with high-speed airplane range, without forcing the crew, passengers, or cargo to sit tilted back toward the sky on takeoff.
So it seems we're talking a lot of Tesla's patents that are in real world at the moment, but he doesn't get the credit for it. Let's talk about the ones that aren't in circulation in the commercial sector.
Several of Nikola Tesla's patented systems and technical proposals never achieved commercial circulation, either due to economic resistance, manufacturing limitations of his era, or fundamental physics challenges at scale. Wireless Power Transmission Grid, US Patent 1,119,732. Tesla proposed transmitting high-voltage electrical power through the Earth's atmosphere and ground crust, using large resonant transmitters, such as Wardenclyffe Tower. Rather than using wires, the system relied on standing electrical waves in the ionosphere to power distant receivers. It failed to reach the commercial sector primarily because grid operators could not figure out how to meter and monetize unguided distribution, leading investors to pull funding. Radiant Energy Collector,
Yeah.
US patent 685,957. This patent describes a system designed to harvest high-velocity particles and atmospheric static charge. An insulated metal plate elevated in the air absorbs charged solar particles and cosmic rays, directing the current into a capacitor to store usable direct current power. While photovoltaic solar cells eventually dominated clean energy, Tesla's direct atmospheric particle collector remains unbuilt in utility-scale power systems. Electrodynamic Earth Oscillator, US patent 514,169. Tesla constructed high-frequency, steam-driven mechanical oscillators capable of matching the resonant frequencies of solid structures and the ground. He proposed using these devices for subsurface geophysics mapping, long-distance acoustic communication, and mechanical power transmission through the Earth's crust. The technology was never commercialized after tests demonstrated severe risks of localized structural resonance and building damage. Thermodynamic Marine Energy System, US patent 1,329,559, thermal engine designs. Tesla outlined closed-loop thermal engines operating on the temperature delta between warm ocean surface waters and cold, deep-sea water currents. The system used low boiling point fluids inside expanded vacuum evaporators to drive low-pressure turbines continuously. Modern ocean thermal energy conversion, OTEC, exists only in small experimental pilot plants, remaining largely uncommercialized due to massive initial capital costs and biofouling challenges in saltwater. Tele-automation and remote-controlled systems, US patent 613,809. Although Tesla demonstrated a wireless radio-controlled boat at Madison Square Garden in 1898, his vision of autonomous wireless torpedoes and self-navigating naval craft was rejected by the military at the time. While modern drone warfare and robotics eventually emerged decades later using modern digital signals.
So here we go again, that Marconi took over from this patent 613809, just like he did with the radio. How the hell did I miss this?
The historical overlap between Tesla and Guglielmo Marconi centers primarily on fundamental radio frequency transmission and selective tuning, though their operational focuses diverged. In the case of patent 613,809, teleautomation, Tesla developed a system for wireless remote control of mechanical vehicles using radio waves, famously demonstrating a radio-controlled boat at Madison Square Garden in 1898. Marconi did not directly pursue or commercialize remote command mechanics. Instead, Marconi concentrated on wireless telegraphy, transmitting Morse code over expanding distances, culminating in his 1901 transatlantic transmission. However, the connection between their work lies in the underlying radio architecture. Tesla's remote control system relied on tuned resonant circuits to direct distinct frequencies to specific mechanical relays, a principle detailed in his primary radio patents. US patents 645,576 and 649,621. When Marconi filed his landmark American radio patents, the US Patent Office initially rejected them, explicitly citing Tesla's prior art along with work by Oliver Lodge and John Stonestone. In 1904, the Patent Office reversed its stance and awarded Marconi rights to radio tuning, allowing the Marconi Wireless Telegraph Company to dominate the commercial market. Tesla initiated legal action for patent infringement. In June 1943, the US Supreme Court overturned Marconi's primary tuning patent, US Patent 763,772, re-establishing Tesla's prior claim to fundamental radio frequency tuning assemblies. Well,
yes, but Tesla initially said that the remote control could be used for military, especially for torpedoes. And what's the connection with Marconi with torpedoes?
Tesla pitched patent 613,809 directly to the US Navy and the War Department as a weapon of naval warfare, an uncrewed radio-controlled boat carrying explosives that could be guided silently to sink enemy ships without risking human crew. The military dismissed it at the time as unworkable fantasy. Guglielmo Marconi and his company established several direct and indirect connections to radio-guided weapons and naval torpedo operations. World War I remote guidance experiments. During World War I, the Marconi Wireless Telegraph Company conducted confidential engineering projects for the British Admiralty and the Italian Royal Navy. These experiments focused on using high-frequency radio signals to steer explosive-laden boats and test remote wireless detonation triggers for aquatic mines and torpedoes. Tactical control of torpedo squadrons. Marconi's commercial strategy centered on securing military contracts to equip torpedo boat destroyers and naval fleets with radio apparatus. This gave naval command structures the ability to direct torpedo strikes across vast distances in real time, moving wireless technology from simple messaging into active combat coordination. Torpedo detection and direction finding. In the 1920s and 1930s, Marconi turned his attention to shortwave and microwave beam systems, what he referred to as a radio searchlight. These directional beam architectures were deployed by navies to detect incoming surface vessels and submerged targets, forming an early precursor to microwave radar systems built specifically to counter torpedo attacks. Naval patent appropriation. Because the Marconi Company held exclusive supply contracts with major navies.
So what you're basically saying is the military decided to Tesla that it would be no good, but yet they gave it to Marconi.
That summary hits directly at a key frustration in technological history. The military establishment rejected Tesla's initial 1898 offer, only to contract with Marconi's commercial entity for similar wireless guidance applications 15 to 20 years later. Several institutional factors drove this pivot: the timing gap and wartime urgency. In 1898, during the Spanish-American War, the US Navy viewed Tesla's radio-controlled vessel as an unproven laboratory demonstration. By the onset of World War I in 1914, naval warfare had changed dramatically. The threat of submarine warfare created an urgent military demand for wireless communication, remote detonation, and directional targeting. Corporate infrastructure versus independent research. Tesla operated as an independent inventor without mass production facilities. Marconi built a global industrial enterprise, the Marconi Wireless Telegraph Company, with manufacturing plants, standard supply chains, and established relationships with the British Admiralty and European navies. When militaries sought wireless hardware, Marconi possessed the manufacturing capacity to deliver scaled orders. Incremental adoption over radical innovation. Militaries rarely adopt radical, fully formed autonomous systems overnight. They initially hired Marconi to install basic ship-to-ship wireless telegraphy. Once Marconi equipment sat on every naval bridge, military engineers incrementally adapted that existing radio hardware to experiment with remote guidance, torpedo steering, and automated detonation. Tesla introduced the complete functional model before the military recognized its tactical necessity, whereas Marconi established a corporate baseline that enabled militaries to implement those same mechanics when war made them essential.
Sorry, I'm just making chips at 3 o'clock in the morning for guests downstairs. It seems like Tesla got the bum deal and everything. Chat's still working. Let me just check it. Looks like everyone's gone to sleep. Therefore, socialise. Well, I hope people have learnt something new. I've learnt a few things that I need to go and now look at. Dun-dun-dun. What else of Tesla's was unproved yet is now in working order in real world?
Several notable concepts engineered by Nikola Tesla were dismissed during his era as impractical or unproven, yet they have since become vital, operating real-world technologies. Resonant inductive wireless power, Witricity and Qi charging. During his lifetime, Tesla's attempts to broadcast continuous electrical energy through air without wires failed at utility scale due to massive inverse square energy loss. However, the core mechanical principle he patented, resonant magnetic coupling matching receiver and transmitter frequencies, is the exact foundation used today in wireless electric vehicle charging pads, smartphone Qi chargers, and implantable medical device charging systems. Extreme ultraviolet, EUV, and X-ray radiation devices. Tesla experimented heavily with high-voltage single-terminal vacuum tubes, producing radiant phenomena that contemporary scientists brushed off as high-frequency discharge anomalies. Modern extreme ultraviolet EUV lithography systems, used by semiconductor foundries to etch nanoscale transistors onto microchips, rely on the exact gas discharge and high-voltage electron bombardment mechanics Tesla originally observed in his single-pole tubes. Geothermal vacuum evaporation and energy harvesting. Tesla patented closed-loop vapor engines designed to generate power from environmental thermal gradients, like tapping subsurface heat differentials or ambient atmospheric energy. While unworkable with early 20th century metallurgy, this concept operates today as geothermal binary cycle power plants and ambient RF energy harvesters, which convert low-grade environmental heat and electromagnetic waves into usable electricity. The Tesla boundary layer turbine/pump, Tesla's smooth disk turbine, US patent in 61206, was largely sidelined by industrial manufacturers because early metallurgy could not prevent thin steel disks from warping under extreme rotational forces. Modern precision laser cutting, CNC machining, and specialized alloys have validated his design, bringing boundary layer disc pumps into commercial deployment for moving shear-sensitive fluids, heavy slurries, and multi-phase liquids without internal impeller erosion.
So quite a bit. Let's talk about the ones that never got made.
Nikola Tesla left behind a massive repository of conceptual notes, preliminary blueprints, and theoretical models for systems that were never physically constructed or tested past basic laboratory bench units. The particle beam death ray, Teleforce. Tesla envisioned a high-energy particle accelerator designed to charge microscopic particles of tungsten or mercury,
Oh,
and
you're
shoot
good,
them via
Lizzie.
electrostatic repulsion through
You're
ambient
good.
air. He claimed the beam could melt engines and down aircraft from hundreds of miles away. It was never built because generating the required direct current potential in a focused, unattenuated beam through atmospheric air presented fundamental physics challenges that early 20th century technology could not resolve. Vertical takeoff electric airships. Beyond his 1928 tilt rotor patent,
I've got
Tesla proposed
questions
large
about that
commercial
already.
passenger airships powered entirely by wireless electromagnetic energy beamed from ground towers. The airships were meant to feature lightweight, metallic electrostatic fins to generate lift and propulsion without carrying
No, I
heavy
don't
fuel
do
or internal
Discord.
combustion engines. Because his wireless
I'm
power
on,
transmission infrastructure was never
I've got a
completed,
Proton
the
email
wireless
in
airship
my
concept remained entirely theoretical. World
description.
System Earth Resonance
You
Transmitters.
can always get me on
Tesla
that.
planned a global network of massive broadcasting towers, similar to Wardenclyffe, spaced strategically across the globe. He theorized that these towers could stimulate the Earth's natural electrical capacitance, allowing simultaneous global transmission of radio
Yeah, you're
signals,
right there.
news, images,
Take
and
this.
electrical power to any point on the planet. Financial collapse and the demolition of Wardenclyffe in 1917 stopped the construction of the full global network. Submarine detection and wireless destruction fields. During World War I, Tesla proposed creating an underwater energetic grid using submerged high-frequency electrodes. The system was designed to generate intense, localized high-voltage fields in seawater to detect approaching submarines by changes in electrical resistance, then discharge high currents directly through the water to neutralize the vessels remotely. The military declined to fund or prototype the underwater network. Thought photography camera. Tesla spent considerable time speculating on a machine that could project human thoughts onto a screen. He believed that an image formed in the mind created an electrical reflection on the retina, which could be captured by an optical sensor, amplified and projected onto a vacuum tube display. The device was never built, as his underlying premise regarding retinal electrical reflections of mental imagery did not align with biological visual processing.
I've got questions. I've got so many questions. So this particle beam, would this be anything like Dragon's Breath by any chance? Built by BAE?
The modern system you are thinking of is Dragonfire, a UK laser-directed energy weapon
Glad you knew.
(LDEW) demonstrator
tells you the
developed
truth.
by an industrial consortium including BAE Systems, MBD UK,
There's a name in there
Leonardo
for you,
UK, and Kinetic Q. While
EA.
both fall into the
If you
category
ever
of
listen to
energy
this,
concepts, their underlying physics and mechanics are fundamentally different.
there we go.
1.
Your favourite
Beam
company.
composition, particles versus photons. Tesla's Teleforce, proposed as a charged particle beam. It aimed to accelerate physical submicroscopic matter, like tungsten or mercury particles, using high-voltage electrostatic repulsion, propelling a concentrated stream of mass through the air. Dragonfire, solid-state high-energy laser. It does not shoot physical particles. Instead, it uses coherent beam-combining technology to merge multiple fiber lasers into a single concentrated beam of photons, pure light. 2. Atmospheric propagation. Tesla's particle beam faced severe atmospheric attenuation. Pushing microscopic physical particles through air at extreme speeds causes air resistance, scattering, and electrostatic blooming, causing the beam to lose focus before reaching distant targets. Dragonfire operates at the speed of light with pinpoint optical accuracy, capable of striking a £1 coin from a kilometer away. It relies on advanced mirrors, electro-optical tracking, and adaptive optics to compensate for atmospheric disturbance, rather
so
than
many
physically
questions
pushing
about this
material through
already.
space. 3.
But for
Energy
entertainment
source and
purposes
function.
only.
Tesla's
And
Teleforce
yeah,
required millions of volts of direct
education.
current static potential via massive Van de Graaff-style charge generators to physically launch material. Dragonfire, powered by high-capacity electrical storage, such as flywheel energy storage systems, to produce a 50 kilowatts class continuous optical energy burning through drone casings and missile hulls for roughly £10 per shot.
£10 a
Dragonfire
shot.
is an optical photon-based energy weapon rather than a particle accelerator. However, it fulfills Tesla's fundamental objective, creating a long-range, line-of-sight energy system capable of disabling airborne targets. This video provides official declassified footage and details regarding the UK's Dragonfire laser-directed energy
Declassified.
weapon trial firings.
Right, I've got to be up in 4 hours. So I'm going to say good night. Good night. Take care, folks. My love.